Committee will come to order. Good morning and welcome to the first of our public witness hearings dedicated to American Indians and Alaskan Native programs. This will actually be, I think, the largest number of tribes we've had in to testify before us, and we're very proud that I think 98 tribes or over 100 tribes are coming in to speak with us today. And I'd like to welcome all of the distinguished tribal leaders and elders and leaders here today. This year, we have an unprecedented number of requests. Oh, you wrote that in there, so I guess I didn't need to say that. Requiring us to expand to a third day to accommodate around 100 tribes and tribal organizations. These hearings are incredibly important, and we appreciate the opportunity to hear from so many tribes and organizations across Indian country. Indian country has been and will continue to be a bipartisan priority of this subcommittee. We have the ranking member and former chairman and the former chairman before that. We all work together on tribal issues. It's one of the areas that's kind of bipartisan, which is kind of nice. I look forward to continuing to work with Ranking Member Pingree to expand the committee's efforts to strengthen our federal commitment to honor our treaty and trust responsibilities with American Indians and Alaska Natives. Thank you to all of our witnesses for appearing before the committee and sharing your concerns and personal perspectives on these important topics. In terms of hearing logistics, I will call each panel of witnesses to the table, one panel at a time. Each witness will be given 5 minutes to present their testimony. The full testimony, the full written testimony, will be included in the record, so please don't feel pressured to cover everything in 5 minutes. We will be using a timer to track progress with each witnesses. When the light turns yellow, the witnesses will have 1 minute remaining to conclude their remarks. When the light turns red, I'll have to ask the witnesses to stop so we can remain on schedule, especially with all the tribes that we have coming in for the next 3 days. We'll hear from every witness on each panel before members will be provided the opportunity to ask questions. Because we have a full day ahead, I request that we try to keep things moving so we can stay on schedule and respect each other's time. I also want to note that committee rules prohibit the use of outside cameras and audio equipment during these hearings. The hearings can be viewed in its entirety on the committee's website, and an official hearing transcript will be available at gpo.gov. With that, I thank all of you for being here today, and I'm happy to yield now to our distinguished ranking member for any remarks she may make.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. I echo the Chair's welcome to this first day of public witness hearings on tribal programs under the jurisdiction of the Interior and Environment Appropriations Subcommittee, and appreciate the Chair scheduling an extra day so we could accommodate the requests. I want to thank everybody for traveling to Washington to testify before the committee. The Trump administration has only been in office for a few short weeks, yet they have unleashed chaos and disruption into indigenous communities and created anxiety and uncertainty for tribal members over their employment status, the continuation of critical health care and educational services, and in some cases have even challenged their citizenship. I hope our witnesses today will use this hearing as an opportunity to sound the alarm on the devastating impacts of this administration's policies. I hope you will shine much-needed spotlight on the damaging impacts that freezes on federal funding, the termination of probationary employees, and the federal hiring freeze have already had and will have on the lives and livelihoods of tribal nations and indigenous communities around the country. I look forward to hearing about what is happening in your communities, the needs and challenges facing Indian country, and your priorities for programs in the Interior Bill. Our discussion today will allow your voices to be heard and will help to inform us as we finish the fiscal 2025 funding bill and then begin developing the fiscal 2026 appropriations bill. With that, I yield back to Chairman Simpson.
Thank you, Ranking Member Pingree. We can now begin with our first panel. Donna Thompson, Vice Chair of the Fort Hall Business Council of the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes, and Chief Allen, Chairman of the Coeur d'Alene Tribes. Donna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Donna Thompson. I am the Vice Chair of the Fort Hall Business Council of the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes of Idaho. And first of all, I want to thank Chairman Simpson, who is our representative, for his long-standing efforts on behalf of the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes and Indian country to uphold the trust and treaty responsibilities. With the recent actions taken by the administration, we are greatly concerned for the funding for tribes is at risk, and that the federal government's ability to fulfill the treaty and trust responsibilities will be hindered by current hiring restrictions and the ongoing firing of federal employees. I respectfully urge this subcommittee to take action to ensure there are no disruptions to tribal program funding and to protect the federal workers supporting Indian country. Today I will focus on 1, protecting funding for IHS and BIA, 2, increasing law enforcement funding, and 3, funding drinking water and wastewater infrastructure needs. The tribes appreciate the inclusion of advanced appropriations for IHS in the last few appropriation bills and request that this be continued. We also request that a similar provision for the BIA to be included to provide continuity for programs such as law enforcement. Further, we respectfully request that all funding for IHS and BIA be made mandatory. However, as a first step, it is critical that contract support costs be made mandatory now. Additionally, Congress has chosen to use Medicaid to help meet the trust responsibility to provide health care. Approximately 50% of tribal members on our reservation are enrolled in Medicaid. Reimbursements are critical for tribal health and IHS clinics. While we understand that this subcommittee does not have jurisdiction over Medicaid, any cuts will have significant negative consequences for Indian health system. We ask that this subcommittee work to ensure that Medicaid funding is protected for tribes. Turning to law enforcement, we appreciate the subcommittee's attempt to increase funding. However, much more needs to be done. Under BIA guidelines, our police department should have 25 officers. But due to severe underfunding, our department has currently 9 officers. This means that only 1 or 2 officers patrol our 550,000-acre reservation covering 4 counties at any given time. This is a serious public safety problem for our reservation. It also creates a huge strain on our officers, with many getting burned out and leaving for other agencies with less stress and better pay and benefits. Last year, the BIA issued a report on law enforcement showing that funding needs across Indian country are over $1.7 billion, but the BIA is funded at just $256 million. This massive underfunding for law enforcement is leading to dangerous conditions on our reservations. We ask the subcommittee to provide law enforcement funding at the level of need in the BIA report. Moving to infrastructure, our drinking water and wastewater infrastructure is undersized and outdated. Our water pressure is often low and doesn't meet firefighting standard, and residential wells are running dry. Further, the majority of the pipes in our drinking water and wastewater systems are in very poor condition, while water towers need to be replaced and lift stations added. This poor infrastructure limits our ability to construct new housing and create economic development. Unfortunately, there remains a severe backlog of drinking water and wastewater projects in Indian country. We ask for significant funding increases for IHS sanitation projects and for EPA's drinking water and clean water Indian set-aside programs. Finally, I want to thank Chairman Simpson and this subcommittee for your continued efforts to help our tribe to reclaim the Gay Mine Superfund site. We ask for your continued support for report language directing the BLM to work with the tribes on a reclamation study. And thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Donna. Chief, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Pingree. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Chief Allen. I'm Chairman of the Coeur d'Alene Tribe. I've had the opportunity and the awesome responsibility to be the chairman for the Coeur d'Alene Tribe for in leadership for about 20 years now, and I take that job really. I don't take it lightly. I want to thank you guys for your guys' dedication, but I also want to thank you guys for your leadership. That's what we need today. Today we need leadership. We need leadership and all of our congressional folks to stand up for all this chaos, you know. And if you look at any Fortune 500 company in this country, you cannot run a company with that much chaos. You cannot lay off thousands and thousands of people without having some kind of without the levee breaking. And you're going to hear from a lot of tribes this week. A lot of these, we're sophisticated. We're the second largest employee in North Idaho. We employ, over 1,500 employees. And only 40% of that is Native Americans. We're here for the greater good of our community in our state of Idaho. Our medical clinic was we were the very first ones to open in the early 90s, and it was a landmark joint effort, not only for the tribe, but for the community as well. And we allow non-members to come in there and provide service. So not only, that the new administration, when they are doing all these cuts and things, it's not only affecting our tribe, it's affecting our community, communities that, have the same goals that we have. We all want that American dream. We all want to live in this country, with that white picket fence. We all want our kids to go to school. We all want our kids to go to, Ivy League schools or, whatever that dream is. And, so all I'm asking is for leadership, for us to come together and work this out. You're going to hear a lot about, I don't want to repeat all these things about, trust responsibility. We're going to, obviously that's, first and foremost, and we have that, But I just wanted to say, maybe give examples of that. For example, why laying off 1,000 people is going to hurt, like with the Department of Interior, or, one part of my mission as a Coeur tribe is I've been buying back land, within our reservation, and I think we're up over 100,000 acres now. I think we're the second largest landowner in Kootenai County and Benoit County. But we can do all that stuff, but we have to wait. We have to wait for all these federal employees who. It's just the way the system is set up, with that trust responsibility. Like I said, it's insulting a lot of times because a lot of tribes have moved beyond that big brother sign off authority and all these things. We need we need, so if we're going to cut them, we're going to need something to fall back on that. And historically, everything that that my colleague talked about, IHS, BIA, law enforcement, Department of Education, the Department of Justice, everything has always been historically funded, at a lower level than need to be. And so tribes have been sophisticated enough to come up and, figure some of that out and, and work with that. So with that, I'm going to yield my rest of my time. Again, thank you guys so much for having me here today. Thank you guys so much for your leadership, and I would stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you both for coming and testifying. It's a long way from Idaho, but it is going to be like 40 degrees in Idaho today, which is amazing, But I appreciate your testimony. Believe me, Chief, you're not any more concerned about what's happening in the country with these unprecedented number of layoffs and stuff and how it's going to impact the tribes. And we've been trying to seek out the information to find out stuff. But when you say that dreams of going to an Ivy League school, I will tell you that University of Idaho and Boise State and Idaho State University are just as good as any of them. So it's not you don't have to pay the huge costs of the Ivy League school. You get just as good an education. But anyway, thank you for your comments. As I said, we share your same concerns. And Donna, you and I have talked many times. She's 12 miles from where I grew up, so we know each other well, and we talked about a lot of those issues, and we'll keep working on those things that you've identified. And it is meeting the trust and treaty responsibilities we have is taking more and more of the budget, and that's okay. That's a commitment that we have to face. We wish we could do it tomorrow, but we're making progress in the right direction. And we're going to continue to do that because I think within this committee, it's, as I said, the one area that we are all agreeing on is that we need to seriously face these issues. Last year when we held the missing and murdered Indigenous women hearings, I think it was enlightening to many of us of the issues that are faced there. And as you said, you got 9 officers, you should have 25. Guess where criminals go?
Exactly.
Where you only got 9 officers instead of 25. So we'll work with you to do that. And then the other issue when you're talking about law enforcement is if you look at Fort Hall, I suspect the same thing is true with the other tribes, the Nez Perce and the Coeur d'Alenes and the Kootenai, is that you hire an officer, you train him, and as soon as they get good and trained and on the reservation, they go to a higher paying job 10 miles down the road at Pocatello or in Blackfoot or something like that. Somehow we got to change that, and that's something that we'll be working on with you in consultation with you, how we address this. So thank you for both for being here. Representative Pingree?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for your testimony. It's nice to have the two of the tribes from the Chairman's state here to begin with, and I can see that you all work closely together, and I know he has a strong commitment to ensuring that much of this funding is available. And I'm sorry about this year and the chaos that you're facing. Usually we have the chance to focus on those very things that you all mentioned around the law enforcement and, many of the things that are ongoing concerns that I know we all want to work harder to increase the funding. And to have this whole other layer of the unpredictability of the layoffs or where cuts are going to be made or other funds is just added to the frustration. So thank you for talking a little bit about that. When you were mentioning the amount of land you've been able to purchase, which is impressive, and that's great for your tribe that you're increasing your land holdings. Were you referring to like people at the BLM that have to work on the transfer? You were sort of saying, have you encountered any of that now? I guess I'm kind of curious from either of you, what already have you encountered that we might be able to push back on our work on in terms of, lack of staffing where you can't get the information or other portals that have been blocked to you?
Thank you, Ranking Member Pingree. I guess one of our areas is transferring the land fee to trust, because it has to go through the BIA. And some of our acres, it's taken years, and it still isn't there to go from fee to trust. And that's one of the areas that we have a concern with, and then finding out that they've terminated some of the regional and central staff members, which we were working with on those. It's just going to take that much longer. So thank you.
That's one of the main thing for us is like if I sold land, I can just go put it up for sale and sell land. It's easy. Right. But as a tribe, if we go buy a piece of land, we have to go through all this red tape, and we have to get appraisals done, especially if we buy it from other tribal members. We got to get appraisals done, and we're not about to stand here and try to rip our own tribal members off. We're pay fair market value, just like that's what
Sure.
And so that's the big issue for us is running. The BIA is so far behind on appraisals, getting these done at a timely manner, and I'm about trying to get the job done now. And because sometimes you can't wait. If you have a piece of land that you got 1,000 acres. For us, we have a lot of timber, and so we're trying to buy a lot of these old timberlands back for some of these logging companies. And just that red tape it's annoying. It's like I said, we've been doing this a long time, and what better people to know than us, to have that as my ancestors would say, the great white grandfather from Washington always, putting a thing in it. And so that's our biggest thing. And I also wanted to say that what we do at Coeur d'Alene has always been about working together and for the community as a whole. Like talk about law enforcement. I feel bad that you guys only have 9. I think we have 14 officers, and our land is a lot smaller than your reservation. But what we implemented was we cross-deputized with both counties, with Kootenai County, Benoit County. Because when I was growing up, we saw, you can't always pick who you fall in love with. And so some of our women were falling in love with non-tribal members, and, it was like a safe zone. So, if a woman got beat, we didn't have no jurisdiction. So that's why we cross-deputized with the county, so we could go into, and arrest. I think bad people are bad people, no matter what color they are, and they need to be arrested. And so that's what we did. And so all these cuts also affects that. So if you cut our law enforcement, it's going to hurt Kootenai County and Benoit County, because they're going to have to patrol our area now, so it really is a wide net that it catches, so it's not just tribes, it's hurting our whole community as a whole. And, both counties, Kootenai County and Benoit County, up north of Idaho.
Thanks.
Ms. McCullen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to you and to the ranking member, thank you for your understanding that I have other duties as a ranking member throughout the day, but I will be here and my staff will be here the entire time. I hear you, even though I come from what's considered a metropolitan area. I was on a city council where we had 8 officers. Yes, it was 3 square miles, but we were very densely populated with everybody driving through all the time. And knowing how hard it was on our officers and to keep and retrain people constantly, because the bigger cities right next door to us had more officers, more opportunity for time off, more flexibility for vacation, all those kinds of things. And it really does impact your communities when people don't feel that that they know the people providing the service. It's not just having the call answered, but it's also having those relationships when they go in on the call. I want to just comment on the EPA portion of what you said with clean water and Superfund sites and all those other kinds of things. And honor, as the chair said, to honor our trust and treaty responsibilities. I know this committee is very mindful of the crosstabs that go into the EPA, the Forest Service, even relationships with the Park Service, BLM. And the more that you can help us with examples, I know that the chair and the ranking member are going to do their level best to make sure that these issues get addressed promptly and efficiently. The last thing I would say, Mr. Chair, and I know this will come up again, 50% of your community members, if I heard you correctly, because I wrote it down so I want to make sure I have it right, rely on Medicaid for their health care through trust and treaty responsibilities. And so here again, when the Medicaid cuts are talked about and how it's done, I don't want anybody to have their Medicaid, but you also have trust and treaty responsibilities where we haven't lived up to our obligation in the past or in the present. So thank you for bringing that up, and I think you're going to share a lot of things that when I am not able to hear, I'm going to hear from the other tribes. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And again, thanks to both of you for coming out and testifying and sharing with us your vision and concern of what needs to get done. And I will tell you, when you talk about the Great White Father in Washington and stuff, I will tell you, we're not the Great White Father in Washington. In fact, I've become more and more convinced that this is your land. You need to be able to do what you need to do, but you need the resources to do it. So appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You bet. Stacy Shepard, Audrey Lee, and Mike Natchees on the next panel. Is that a beaded tie? Let's get that water because you're up first. Stacy, you're up first. I know that Chairman Cole was going to be here. He'll be here as soon as he can, but he's being held up. He's a responsible individual and has a lot of things to do. Yeah, I know it. But anyway, we'll introduce him when he comes in. So go ahead, Stacy.
Well, Halito, and good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I serve the Choctaw Nation as the Executive Officer of Member Services. So Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma's education programs, which are a very high priority for our tribe. The Choctaw Nation is the third largest federally recognized tribe in America with approximately 225,000 members, covering about 11,000 miles in southeastern Oklahoma. We prioritize education as a vital tool for empowering our generations, future generations, strengthening our communities, and preserving our cultural heritage. Access to quality education, especially in rural areas, remains a critical need for our students as they face unique challenges, such as limited resources, geographic barriers, and disparities in funding. We recognize public schools as the heart of the rural communities, which is why our School of Choctaw Language partners with local school districts across the Choctaw Nation Reservation to preserve our native language. The Choctaw language courses have been taught to at least 1,100 students, both native and non-native. Our Choctaw Nation Head Start program provides early childhood education and support to hundreds of students, laying that strong foundation for lifelong learning. About 2/3 of our students who are in the Head Start are Choctaw tribal members. So we're trying to ensure that a majority of our youngest learners receive culturally enriched, high-quality education, and this program plays a vital role in preparing children for academic success by fostering cognitive, social, and emotional development. Investing in early education, Head Start helps strengthen families and communities while preserving Choctaw traditions and values for future generations. The Choctaw Nation substantially supplements the limited federal funding available for Head Start. Education has always been the cornerstone for tribal members and our values. After the removal and resettlement in Oklahoma, the first thing we did, our ancestors did, was to establish schools and churches. So decades later, Jones Academy, our Bureau of Indian Education residential school, was founded in 1891 and continues to serve as a beacon of opportunity for Native children dealing with family hardships. Today, it provides education and support to 147 students from 28 different tribes and was one of the few BIE residential schools to remain open during the COVID-19 pandemic. Remarkably, for 2 consecutive years, 90% of the Jones Academy graduating seniors have enrolled in college, trade school, or military, with a 70% continuation rate. Because of the federal funding of Jones Academy has been inadequate, the Choctaw Nation has substantially supplemented that funding in recent years. Also, the Johnson O'Malley, the JOM program, serves a total of 13,453 students, providing vital education support and resources such as school supplies, tutoring, cultural enrichment. And this funding plays a vital role in bridging those gaps in resources, ensuring that they have the tools they need for academic success. But since inflation, that funding has been eroded, and so the value of the federal JOM funding over the years, the Choctaw Nation has felt compelled to provide additional tribal funding support for our elementary and secondary schools. Our vocational rehabilitation program has assisted 148 students with tuition and job placement, providing crucial support to help them achieve their educational and career goals. With a modest annual funding amount of $211,000, vocational rehabilitation continues to remove barriers to education and employment, empowering Native students to reach their full potential and contribute meaningfully to their communities. Tribally funded programs, such as the Choctaw Nation Posse Summer School Program, we collaborate with school districts in our reservation to offer a 23-day summer learning program. During this time, thank you. 33,000 students have participated in Posse. When they have completed, if they've been through the Posse in 4 years, they are reading on 3rd grade level. And I will add something here. There are many states in the United States that determine number of prison beds based on a child's 3rd grade reading score. We have the data to back it up. We're doing research with Oklahoma State University. The state of Oklahoma should follow in what we're doing. Career development. 6,640 tribal members with career and technical training to help individuals gain the skills, knowledge, and resources needed to advance in their careers, ultimately contributing to a stronger, more skilled workforce. So as we look ahead, continued federal investment in Indian education is essential to ensuring that Native American students have that fair shot at the American dream. Strong education systems are critical for healthy tribal nations and rural communities. And while the subcommittee, I know, is facing competing priorities and challenges, funding support for education should not be sacrificed for the sake of other goals. the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma is requesting that you fund these programs like JOM, Voc Rehab, BIE-funded schools like Jones Academy, and the efforts of tribes to work with local public school districts to increase the quality of educational opportunities. Yakoki. Thank you.
Audrey, you're next.
Minwin Wathen, Audrey Lee, Natchees. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I will start with, my name is Audrey Rose Lee. I'm the second chief for the Sac and Fox Nation, and I'm honored to be here. So on behalf of Principal Chief Randall Carter and the citizens of the Sac and Fox Nation, home of Jim Thorpe, Olympic gold medalist for the 1912 pentathlon and decathlon medals, it is a privilege to stand before you today and submit our tribal priorities for BIA, IHS, BIE, and EPA budgets. The unique political stance between the U.S. and sovereign tribal nations is solely based on the contribution of Iroquois and the Confederacy of Nations and the development of a U.S. Constitution, and to reaffirm the continued government-to-government relationship between Indian tribes and the U.S. as established in the Constitution. In 2025, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act of 1975, signed by President Richard Nixon, the first acknowledgement by the United States government that tribes were capable of managing federal funds and programs. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan issued an Indian policy statement which reaffirmed the government-to-government relationship between the U.S. and federally recognized tribes. The policy emphasized tribal self-governance and local control over reservation affairs, while pledging to assist tribes in strengthening their governments, removing federal impediments to tribal self-determination, essentially promoting a policy of self-governance for tribes without the threat of termination. In 1988, President George H. Bush signed Public Law 100-472, which broadened the scope of the ISEAA, allowing tribes more flexibility to determine our own priorities and allocate federal resources where they are needed the most at tribal level. The Sac and Fox Nation has pioneered the self-determination and self-governance agenda for the past 50 years, but current administration actions threaten our collective progress and warrant immediate intervention by Congress. The nation reminds Congress of the statutory language required consultation with tribes prior to executive action will impact tribal programs and tribal funding. We seek your assurances that federal funding for tribal programs is not paused, reallocated, reclassified, or deprioritized when implementing any executive orders to other administration priorities. Congress needs a remedy that will reascend across the board personnel cuts, the solution of federal agencies will severely impact the U.S. government fulfilling the trust responsibilities and treaty obligations to tribes and Native citizens. Tribal programs, services, and functions and activities must be exempt from recessions, sequestrations, and government operation shutdowns. The Sac and Fox Nation strongly requests that you protect the policies and have strengthened the tribal-federal relationship and support tribal self-determination and self-governance. I bring forth 3 tribal-specific budget requests for our nation. The first one being a $6.52 million request to fully fund operations and maintenance of the Sac and Fox Nation Juvenile Detention Center. This will allow our juvenile facility to run at full capacity, provide all the necessary care and services. Even though the nation continues to receive and use federal dollars to address the issues of juvenile delinquency and detention for tribes in the Southern Plains region and Eastern Oklahoma region, we have never received sufficient funds to operate the facility at its fullest. Number 2, a $3 million request to fund the Tribal General Assistance Program with EPA. The nation is requesting that GAP be less restrictive, competitive, and provide more funding for staffing. GAP lacks flexibility and fails to meet the needs of tribes, including adequate funding, sufficient technical assistance to assist tribes to fulfill the trust responsibility. Specifically for the nation, EPA does not provide adequate oversight as our federal trustee for oil spills or any environmental incidents that impacts our reservation and citizens. For decades, we have been impacted by industrial negligence and lack of abandonment for the removal and decommission of abandoned wells, mines, pipes, cables, and other remnants related to oil spills and contamination footprints across the nation's jurisdictional lands, which span across 3 counties. The nation needs funding to conduct planning and to develop our infrastructure to prepare for oil spills, contamination, and environmental emergencies that continue to damage our community and citizens. In the past, we have been severely disregarded and remain vulnerable to industry aftermath across 21,000 acres of allotments, 800 acres of tribal lands. In 2022, the most recent possibility, the worst oil spill at Skull Creek released about 300,000 gallons of oil into the creek and compromised thousands of animals, fish, trees, and many other natural resources. With that being said, in closing, I thank you for allowing me to speak this morning, so thank you.
Thank you. Mike? I still think that's a great tie.
Thank you. Mike Goose, hello and good morning. Chair Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and honorable members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity given to me to testify today. My name is Michael Natchees, and I serve as the Uinta Band representative of the Ute Indian Tribe Business Committee. Our reservation is in northeastern Utah, and it is the second largest in the U.S. We cover roughly 4.5 million acres within our exterior boundary. We have about 2,700 members of the tribe, and about half of our members do live there on the reservation. I'm here today to talk about one of the topics is on Indian energy and Indian energy development. I'm here today to ask this subcommittee to direct the BIA to use what will soon to be FY26 appropriated money in an effort to turn over control of our Ute Indian energy development leases, business development agreements, and related documents to our tribal government under a federally approved Tribal Energy Development Agreement, the TERA. These TERAs were authorized and conditioned by Congress over 20 years ago after years of hearings and studies. Doing this will improve tribal oil and gas oversight, bringing it back to the local tribal level, while also saving taxpayers money. Unfortunately, previous administrations have not gotten around to approving our TERA agreement. We believe that this is because we produce oil and gas rather than other forms of clean energy, and I'm here today to ask that you help us correct that. While some federal assistance still needed, tribes like mine have outlived the need for the current level of federal recognition. The Ute Indian tribe takes the idea of tribal oil and gas oversight very seriously. Our people live near our oil production fields. They develop right within our reservation, and you know, we raise our children there. We have our families that work there, and the air, the water, animals, flora, those are all of our treaty assets, and we take the protection of those extremely seriously. I used to be in the air quality world, and so I know firsthand that energy development can be done cleanly. And we know that this will take time, so I'm asking you to ensure that those federal employees at the BIA, the BLM, and Honor stay in place and are fully funded. Just this past week, we lost 7 of the 8 people who help us secure those federal approvals at the agency level. We need those employees back immediately. Our tribal energy production cannot afford to become an unintended consequence of national budget cuts and employee terminations. The oil and gas sector on the Uinta and Ori Reservation produced $643 billion in direct revenues to local, state, and federal governments, and generated 8,300 direct, indirect, and induced jobs, and $500 million in total labor income. Shutting down the key essential workers that are necessary to maintain and develop our energy resources shuts down not only the United States and Utah's ability to maintain energy dominance. This is not a tribal issue. It is an American issue, and a lack of adequate staffing and budgetary support undermines national security interests and impacts the environment by pushing that energy development to other areas of the world where environmental protections do not exist. It is therefore critical that we get support we need to ensure our energy resources can continue to be developed and maintained. The other issue I have here today is funding for BIA law enforcement and also our detention staff. Additionally, as many tribes have testified, the BIA and its Office of Justice Services lack the funding necessary to fulfill the U.S. treaty and trust responsibilities in the area of law enforcement and public safety. On average, we have a total of 3 law enforcement officers per shift to patrol and respond to 911 calls on our 4.5 million acres. The Ute tribe is already contributing over 50% of the funding for the police force with our tribal funds. Even then, answering a 911 call can take up to an hour, and our officers operate without backup. Funding for detention services is also significantly inadequate. The Ute tribe was forced to build its own $36 million detention center because of a lack of BIA construction dollars. Now getting BIA to fund its operation at the intended level has proven almost impossible. Today, the BIA continues to ship our tribal detainees off the reservation to county jails where it rents insufficient bed space. Tribal members are sent away from the reservation to county jails, and the BIA pays county detention facilities every 2 weeks, diverting funding to off-reservation facilities. Additionally, prisoners are often released from jail or not picked up on warrants due to the lack of space and additional costs of housing them off our reservation. This creates a public safety issue for our tribe, and it makes no sense. In conclusion, Congress must uphold its trust and treaty responsibilities to the Ute Indian tribe and other tribes as well. Chronic underfunding of programs supporting Indian tribes continues to plague our ability to develop our resources, promote our economies, and provide safe communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Before we continue with questions, I'd like to recognize the full committee chairman, Tom Cole from Oklahoma, and thank him for joining us today as the first Native American to serve as chair of the Appropriations Committee and a member of the Chickasaw Nation. He continues to be one of the biggest champions, obviously, in Indian country, and has educated a lot of us to the needs in Indian country. So I'd like to yield to Chairman Cole for his remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And before I go to my prepared remarks, I want to make 2 or 3 off-the-cuff comments. First, it's wonderful to be back in this room. I love this room. I love this subcommittee. It was the first subcommittee I got to serve on when I came to Appropriations in 2009. You were the ranking member and then became the chairman. And, you know, for good or ill, most of what I know about being a chairman, I learned from you sitting at this table. So if I ever make a mistake, you can blame Simpson. But if I ever do anything right, you can give him the credit, too. And I want to compliment Chairman Simpson and my good friend, Ranking Member Pingree. This committee on Indian things, and this began a long time ago under you and Moran, and I saw it with Calvert and Betty McCullum. On Native American issues, we really do try to work together. We really try to find common ground, and we all recognize that we have treaty and trust responsibilities that we have not historically done a very good job of keeping. And so this committee has led the way and done a lot in the law enforcement area recently. That's your joint, I know, priority, because I've had both of you come and speak to me. If you could give us a little extra money, we'd spend it where you wanted to go in Indian country. This committee has also and made steady progress. Its problem is limited resources, but on Indian health, whole variety of things. And those have been always done in a bipartisan manner. So, you know, all of you that serve on this committee, I want to thank you for doing it because I think it's an extraordinarily important committee, and I think it's worked extraordinarily well. We have a lot of things on this committee, subcommittee, that we disagree on. It might be EPA, it might be climate change. Well, there's plenty of things to disagree about. This is not one where we disagree. This is one where we try to find common ground and work together. And I can tell you both sides of the aisle push for more resources to get here. I got to add in a personal state pride note, Stacy, when I walked in, first thing the chairman said, boy, her testimony was fantastic. She's really great. I said, well, yeah, she's Choctaw. That's like almost a Chickasaw. So, yeah. But I was going to say, I'll talk to Chief Batten and let him know you really hit it out of the park for him when the chairman's pleased with your comments. And again, I appreciate all of you coming. And Chairman, I want to thank you, and it's a long-standing tradition. This committee, there's not very many committees that take 3 days of testimony because they want to hear from their constituency and the people that they represent. And under Democrats and Republicans alike, this has been a kind of hallmark day. And the committee learns so much when you take the time to come and testify. And so we're really pleased that you took time from your schedules to come, and your tribes were supporting of sending you here. I know this is not an easy endeavor, but it really helps the Congress of the United States do the right job. So again, I want to thank the chairman and ranking member Pingree, and good morning. Thank all of you for being here this week and for taking the time to testify on important issues affecting your communities. As an enrolled member of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma, tribal issues have always been at the forefront of policy decisions I make as a member of Congress and as a member of this important committee. I have been and remain committed to ensuring the federal government upholds its trust responsibility to Native Americans to provide basic services and resources throughout Indian country. And I'll add, we've made significant progress in housing, in roads in the last couple of years. And again, I compliment, well, I guess, I got to be the chairman of THUD when we made our first move, but I compliment Chairman Womack for continuing that and adding on the housing and road front, and his colleague, formerly Mike Quigley, now Chairman Clyburn, or former Whip Clyburn. But the point is, we're working together on those issues, not just in this committee, but in a variety of committees. I have been in contact, and to your point, Mike, with agencies in the White House to ensure our responsibilities to tribes are fully and understood across all facets of the federal government. And sometimes people just don't get it. I mean, they quite often come from places that don't have a tribal presence. They don't know much about the issue. I am pleased that Secretary Burgum actually issued an order that anything in Interior that was dealing with Indian tribes, the money was to flow, there was to be no interruptions. It's my understanding that Secretary Kennedy has done the same thing in HHS. Obviously, we've got a problem on the energy front, which you quite rightly point out. And we'll try and work on those as well. This is, again, these are important treaty and trust responsibilities the United States needs to fulfill. And our commitment is to work with you and our colleagues across the aisle to make sure that those are kept. I look forward to hearing the testimony from each of you. I'm sorry I missed yours, Stacy, but I got a little bit of yours, Audrey, but I got all of Mike's, and I'll be here for a while. And we do keep track of what tribes coming in have to say. And so, again, just thanks for taking the time. It's really an important thing, and I look forward to a good 3 days of hearings on these issues. And believe me, it will guide what we do, I think, on a bipartisan basis. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Cole, and thanks for being here. I know that you have one of those jobs where you have a lot to do, and you're probably requested in about 12 different places right now for various meetings. But thank you for being here. I know that this obviously is a very important subject to you, as it is to this committee. But thank you all for your testimony. And as you said, Mike, losing some of these people that are necessary to continue your operations is of concern to all of us. And it's something that we will be working on and trying to make sure that that doesn't impact what happens on tribes. But Stacy, I got to tell you, your testimony spoke to my heart. It is, education is, in fact, I'm going to run it off and spread it around a little bit if you don't mind. But I've often said that, we have problems getting doctors and dentists and nurses out on reservations and stuff like that. In the long term, the only way you're going to solve that is to educate the members of your tribes and send them to colleges at University of Idaho or Boise State or Idaho State University. But I understand that there are some potentially other good colleges across the country, but those three kind of, we talked about this earlier. Yeah. But anyway, to educate them, send them to medical school and stuff. 90% of them will come back to the reservation and serve the members on the reservation of the tribes and stuff. And that's the long-term solution. So I really appreciate your testimony and stuff. So I don't really have any questions, but Ms. Pingree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cole, for being with us today and all your support for Indian country. Thank you to everyone who testified today. I'm, of course, partial to Maine, and we'll get to hear from them next, but my partner grew up in Coeur, Oklahoma, so I've had a chance to visit a few of the tribes and seen some of the great work that goes on down there. And Ms. Shepherd, your talk about education was really informative, and I agree with the chair. It could inform a lot of our public education, the work that you're doing. And I also know so many of the tribes are working hard to preserve the native language, and the way you're doing it from the very beginning really is extremely impressive. So thank you for that. Ms. Lee, appreciate your remarks about, or chiefly, second chiefly, about the EPA and the important role in dealing with cleanup. So we'll try to follow up a little more on that. And we are concerned about some of the lack of availability of access to EPA. And to you, Chairman Natchees, right? Yeah, Councilman. Sorry about this loss of personnel. That's really severe. And as you talked about, being able to move forward on some of that decision making, however the decision is going to come down, you want to get it done. And so we can probably follow up and try to figure out if those are positions that could be reinstated, because 7 out of 8 does not seem like a good management decision and parallels much of what we've seen of sort of arbitrary loss of personnel and firing. And we know throughout all Indian country programs, we've already had personnel shortages. It takes way too long to get a decision or to get the work done. So that's just outrageous. We'll try to figure out how we can help with that. But thank you all for your testimony. Really appreciate your being here today. Yield back.
Just really quick, to our distinguished chairman, Cole, when Ms. Shepherd was testifying, she talked about the remarkable work that the tribe has put in their own dollars to keep Head Start and other things going, and how it's huge dividends. Johnson O'Malley was mentioned, but Esther Martinez and some of the native language things all reside, a lot of them, in the Department of Education. So I'm just going to put another thing on your plate, that as you're talking to counterparts in the White House, our trust and treaty, the obligations in the Department of Education, which they're talking about totally dismantling, need to, along with for all our children in our country, and need to be held harmless. Thank you.
First of all, Ms. Lee, I am so sorry that I came in the middle of your testimony and sat next to you and then moved. I was trying to be as unobtrusive as possible, and I missed the mark by a mile. And I apologize to all of you that I came in, and I'm also going to have to leave. I have to be in another hearing right now. But Mr. Chair, or Councilman, sorry, I support your goal of producing more energy in the Uinta Basin, and I'm sure you know that the governor of Utah's #1 initiative right now is more energy production in Utah. So I look forward to working with your council, with the governor's office, and with the rest of the Utah delegation to help make sure that we're producing reliable and clean energy in Utah. Thank you for being here. I really am sorry that I have to leave. I would love to sit here, but we have a wild week going on around here this week. I yield.
It is a wild week, and it's like I've got an Energy and Water Committee going on right now that I'm just not going to make it. But there are hearings going on all over, and I know Betty has a classified hearing that she's got to be in and other things. So there will be members popping in and out and everything. But I will tell you this, I do take the testimony home and read it. And that's all included in the record and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. Tom, did you have?
Yeah, just a quick, I was going to, before Celeste left, I was going to say, when have we not had a wild week around here in a while? But I do want to make one quick comment, because Stacy, I read your testimony last night, and I've had an opportunity to visit the language school. And I got to tell you guys, it's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. It's one of the best public tribal partnerships I've ever seen. I mean, where you've got literally speakers in one place and you're telecommunicated, connected to, I think it's over 100 schools or something like that, isn't it?
Approximately there are 87 schools within our reservation area.
Yeah.
I believe we are in 40 schools right now. We have expanded into the elementary schools also, which is a great place to start, and we're also teaching in some of the universities.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing, and one of the best uses of dollars to preserve the language and restore the culture that I've ever seen. So, those of you that represent tribes, you ought to send there are people that are concerned about the language issues down to the Choctaws, and let them show them what they're doing. And I guess there's been a pretty good reception in the public school system about having this service available.
Met the world language credit for those schools. Now, the state of Oklahoma is changing that requirement, but it's not changing having that language in those schools. And recently, Chief Batten has put significant dollars into an apprenticeship program. So now we are hiring tribal members to come back, and they are working 8 hours a day, and their sole responsibility is to learn the language. So that we probably have had about 20-something graduate. We will continue to do that on a yearly basis, and then we'll be teaching in our schools. We have to replace our first speakers. They are all in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they are still teaching in our public schools.
Well, I just want to add, this is another, honestly, example of if you help tribal nations succeed economically, they take the dollars and invest them back in their own people. Because it's not a federal program. This is a program that the Choctaws fund with their money that they earn in their enterprises. And I'm very proud of that, too. I mean, it doesn't mean we should ever be short on pushing the federal government to respond or to fulfill its responsibilities. But when you see a tribe step up and say, this is important to us culturally, historically, we're going to spend our money on this. And Choctaws do it on health care. They do it on a whole variety of services. They take federal dollars and then add to them out of their enterprises. And again, I would invite you all, you should go and see their headquarters, by the way. It'll put about any tribal headquarters I've ever seen and complex. It is a remarkable testament to initiative and enterprise and reinvestment in your own people. So well done. Yield back.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here. But yeah, the tribal, I've been down and spent quite a bit of time actually with the Shoshone-Bannock tribe in Fort Hall, and they're doing native language stuff, and it's fascinating to go into this class with these first and second graders.
When Chief Pyle was there.
Yeah, it was. It's fascinating to watch this stuff, and we cannot afford to lose these native languages and stuff, and that means it's a concerted effort to keep them alive and stuff. So proud of what you do. And do you interact with other tribes that want to do?
We're learning from other tribes. We didn't come up with all these ideas on our own. We seek out other people who are doing this. We've done some things that people come to us. I just call it Indian copyright. We're going to share.
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's how we learn. That's how we build and grow. We are a sharing community, and so we go out and share what we've learned with others, and then we go to others and what are you doing? What are you doing well? What's working for you? Help us miss some of the pitfalls, and so absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate your testimony. We now have Kirk Francis, Corey Hinton, Brian Harris, and John Johnson. Kirk, you're first.
Excellent. No jokes about Maine potatoes today, nothing like that.
First of all, that's an oxymoron. Say that's an oxymoron.
Well, good morning, everyone. Mr. Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, it's an honor to be here. My name's Kirk Francis. I am the Tribal Chief at Penobscot Indian Nation in the state of Maine. This committee's always been gracious with your time, and I appreciate you continuing to hold these witness days. I'd like to begin by asking this committee to work with the agencies within your jurisdiction to clarify that federal programs, funding, and employees related to tribal nations are not diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or environmental justice programs, and should not be subject to workforce reductions, funding cuts, or hiring freezes. Our political government-to-government relationship with the United States is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, treaties, federal statutes, and has been consistently confirmed by the United States Supreme Court. We have had numerous instances in the past month where our federal funding has been paused and our federal points of contact are either gone or are being told they cannot talk to us. One of the more egregious impacts on us was our inability for several weeks to access our own trust funds that are managed and held in the Department of Interior. Accessing these funds is usually a quick and simple process, but the recent changes resulted in us having to go through extra steps and review, which delayed our access by several weeks. I am happy to report that we finally did receive access to these funds late last week, but it provides an example for why there needs to be clarification to agencies to exempt Indian country from these new actions and cuts. As the committee considers funding levels for fiscal year 2026, I want to share some quick thoughts about the Indian Health Service and the EPA. We are always concerned about funding levels for the IHS. This committee has been strong advocate for increasing funding for the IHS, and we hope that you can continue your strong advocacy. However, much of the recent increases in the IHS funding have gone towards fulfilling legal obligations, such as contract support costs and 105L leases. For fiscal year 2026, we asked the committee to try and increase funding for more primary and preventative health care services. This is particularly important given that life expectancy of Native Americans has decreased by over 6 years in the past decade. The EPA is also incredibly important for the Penobscot Nation since our people continue to hunt and fish on a regular basis and rely on traditional plants and for medicinal and cultural purposes. We also have a thriving small business economy with many of our citizens being professionally licensed recreation guides, and we participate in sustainable timber harvesting. The various programs at the EPA help mitigate past harm caused by the federal actions or inactions that allowed pollution to our lands, waters, and natural resources. Some of these programs are specifically designated for tribal governments, while others have a larger applicant pool where tribal governments must compete with non-native entities for this funding. As the committee determines EPA's funding for fiscal year 2026, we ask that you consider doing the following. 1, protect and increase funding for long-standing tribal programs at the EPA, and 2, urge the agency to work with tribal governments to protect discretionary grants that have been awarded to us but have been paused because those grants are funded by the Inflation Reduction Act or the bipartisan infrastructure law. I want to provide the committee with an update on our public safety and law enforcement crisis we discussed last year. Unfortunately, we continue to struggle. At one point, our police department was down to only having our chief of police, who had to take an administrative and patrol duties. But for his 24 years of service with us and his ability to triage funds and work long hours, we would have had to close our police department. Additionally, we ran into several problems with the Bureau of Indian Affairs when we tried to contract with the local town's police department to help fill our gaps until we recruit and train new officers, which is underway. The BIA informed us that we could not use federal funds to pay for a contract with a local town because those officers were not trained by the federal government. Additionally, the BIA said it could not temporarily transfer federal officers to our tribe because we are governed by a restrictive settlement act, and that requires our criminal law to mirror state law. Essentially, the BIA said federal law enforcement officers could not be transferred to us because they are not trained by the State Police Academy. The inflexibility of the BIA required us to shift funds from other departments, utilize our own general funds, and this contract is in place today to provide public safety for our community. We are not the only tribe that has encountered this problem. Given this, we ask the committee to include language in your report for FY 2026 that directs the BIA to consult with tribal governments on ways to increase flexibility in how we use our funds for law enforcement and public safety. Lastly, as you know, funding for tribal courts remains at critically low levels, and we continue to encourage the committee to find ways to increase funding for our courts. These courts are on the front lines of our battle against illicit drugs. Most of our child welfare cases, for example, involve some type of opioid abuse. And our court systems operate with an annual shortfall of more than $500,000. I again want to thank you all for your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thanks for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Kirk. I appreciate it. Corey, you're next.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cole.
Yeah.
It's my first time here. Thank you for bearing with me. I'll try again. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cole, Madam Ranking Member, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. My name's Coeur Hinton. I'm an attorney for the Passamaquoddy tribe. I'm here to testify on behalf of Chief William Nicholas, who's unable to be here today. I'm also a citizen of the tribe, and so it's a tremendous honor to be able to serve my people and to be able to testify on their behalf here today. I'd like to begin by briefly commenting on the significance of the trust relationship to my people, the Passamaquoddy people. Where I come from, we're proud to be American. Our chiefs signed the first ever American treaty, the Treaty of Watertown, just days after the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. The Declaration of Independence and its idealistic recitals of equal rights for men were read into the record of our treaty negotiations. Our ancestors survived the tyranny of European kings and far-flung monarchs, and just like John Hancock wanted his blown-up signature to make a statement to the king, our establishment of diplomatic ties with the United States of America in that moment was more than just words on paper. It was emblematic. We did not want to speak French or worship a king, and so we placed our faith in a young, idealistic American democracy. In that treaty, our respective nations promised peace and friendship in exchange for diplomatic and military support to the Americans. We honored that treaty, and we sent hundreds of our Passamaquoddy warriors to serve under the command of General George Washington. Our Passamaquoddy patriotism forged what is now the United States of America in part, and we're deeply proud of these contributions. We sacrificed to help build this country, and our citizens have continued to serve admirably in the Americans' armed forces ever since that day. The Passamaquoddy tribe, like our fellow Wabanaki nations and many other tribal nations, view our relationship with the United States as something greater than Democrats or Republicans, party politics, or shifts in domestic priorities. We don't celebrate one party or another, we celebrate America. We celebrate our continued treaty relationship with the United States, which still stands despite a civil war and 2 world wars. We helped found this country, we fought in every war since then, and we're damn proud to be here today. These sacrifices were born out of our shared relationship that exists between my nation and yours. It's one that the United States was founded in recognition of, and it's one that this Congress has continually supported for the past 50-plus years as the current federal era of promoting self-determination has continued. We've endured so much since 1776, yet here we are aiming higher to achieve better outcomes for our people. Beyond this historical context, I would like to identify and emphasize 2 particular funding priorities for the Passamaquoddy tribe in Indian Township: public safety and greater support for children and families. Since the pandemic, our police department and our child and family services departments have struggled, similarly to the Penobscot Nation, to stay staffed and to stay operational. Understaffed police departments and child and family service departments leave people at risk. The safety of the people suffers as a result. Our chief, William Nicholas, who's unable to be here today, is a career cop. To this day, he still takes shifts, puts on the badge, gets in the patrol car to ensure that our officers have backup and are not working too many overtime hours. The dedication of that man is incredible, but it's not sustainable to expect the chief of a tribe who runs a sovereign nation to also take shifts in a squad car whenever the need arises. For that, I would respectfully ask that this Congress consider increasing funding to support BIA police officer recruitment and retention to help continue improvements to public safety and policing in our communities. Similarly, our child and family welfare services departments are in major need of additional support, particularly for ICWA-related matters. Our current child and family services departments have over 90 active cases with a staff of less than 3. And I say less than 3 because 2 are full-time and 1 is a department head who also has to administer department responsibilities. These staff members are responding 24/7 to child safety calls, which usually involve substance use and very frequently lead to risks or directly involve domestic violence. We frequently have young people using drugs and alcohol who are in need of emergency intervention. However, we lack the resources to truly provide emergency intervention 24/7 responses, particularly the children who are most vulnerable. And our staff are not always capable of providing emergency intervention, even when they are able to be there on the spot. As a result, some children are not always getting the proper protective care that they need, and some of our children are falling into the state system as a result. I would therefore respectfully ask that you consider increasing funding to the BIA's ICWA programs and child and family programs as a part of this appropriations process to help improve outcomes for our Passamaquoddy children. I thank you for your time. Kuchi Waliwan.
Thank you, Corey. John?
Hear me okay?
Is it on?
No, it is.
There it
You hear
is.
me okay? Bonjour, Nindidway Magani Duk, Wantanang Gijik and Disnakas, Makwa, Nindodame, Nindao, Waswaganin, and Dunjba. Good morning, members of the subcommittee. I am John Johnson, Senior President of the Lac Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. I am serving in my third term as president. I am joined by members of the Tribal Council. We have traveled a great distance from our homeland, Waswaganin, in Wisconsin, to be here. Thank you for the invitation to testify. Before I summarize our funding needs, I want to put our tribe's request in context. Our ancestors and each succeeding generation of tribal members have fully honored our treaty obligations to the United States. Our veterans have served the nation's armed forces. They have fought, bled, and died for the United States in all its wars. Your funds represent a portion of the United States trust responsibility to tribal veterans, their families, and the tribes. Federal appropriations in the Interior Spending Bill have nothing to do with DEI initiatives and everything to do with honoring that trust responsibility. Firing federal staff who serve us and oversee our 638 contracts and cutting our federal appropriations as government waste will harm tribal members and non-tribal members, especially in rural America. Please stand up for rural America and push back against the false narrative. Who will answer the phone if BIA region and agency offices are gutted? Federal appropriations spell a difference between the success and failure of tribal programs, which in turn directly influence the health and safety of our tribal members and non-tribal members in our community. Our tribe is the largest employer in several Wisconsin counties that border our reservation. We are not here for a handout. We are here to remind Congress of our tribe's treaty sacrifices that bestowed blessings beyond measure on the United States and its citizens. The United States promised to provide services. We now provide many of those services ourselves within the funding of this subcommittee. Please do not cut our 638 contract funding. Cut BIA and IHS funds, and you cut us. Crime, unemployment rates, and substance abuse will increase on our reservation and surrounding non-tribal communities. We are interconnected. Rural America sinks or swims together. Last July, the House passed a $38 billion interior appropriation measure that provided key increases for fiscal year 2025 that tribes requested in the last year's hearing. Please build on that fine appropriation measure. It included significant increases to BIA, public safety and justice programs to help tribes hire more tribal police officers and investigators, significant increases to BIE-funded programs, significant increases to IHS budgets, sustained funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and BIA and EPA funds granted by the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, GLFWIC, of which our tribe is a member. GLFWIC funding is critical to maintain healthy habitats for fish, wildlife, and agriculture for 11 tribes in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan in our ceded territories. Please safeguard appropriations benefiting GLFWIC. I conclude with the following requests. Promote tribal language initiatives within BIA and BIE funding to help educate proud, confident Native youth. Address pay disparities for tribal police officers by passing the funding, the Parity for Tribal Law Enforcement Act, so we can retain law enforcement officers, and address the lack of infrastructure funding to provide wastewater systems, treatment facilities for existing and future tribal homes, and the lack of robust funding for specialty care services such as neurology and oncology that drain purchase referred care budgets too quickly. Access to Specialty services like the ones mentioned above provide treatment and care for tribal patients with life-threatening illnesses. Tribes ensure more IHS facilities and service funds to meet our needs. Our tribe has traveled here to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem today. We fail, you fail. We work together, we rise together. It's not the bad people that will ruin the world. It's the good people that are going to let it happen. Miigwech.
Thank you. I appreciate that, John. Brian?
Good morning. Chairman Simpson, Chairman Cole, Ranking Member Pingree, and other members of the subcommittee. So this is my second time testifying before y'all, and I appreciate y'all having me back. And so with that, as you know, my name is Brian Harris, and I am the newly elected chief of the Catawba Indian Nation. I'm a year and a half into my first term, and I'm honored to be here today to speak on behalf of my people and to highlight some of the areas that I find that's in desperate need and the need to continue to be funded, as you've already heard here this morning. And one of those is the Indian Child Welfare Services, one of the most pressing concerns of the Catawba Nation. And as you've heard throughout here this morning, it's through all nations. And I can't, a year and a half in, I sit here and I cannot believe the issues that we have not only in the state of South Carolina, but in North Carolina. As you know, we are federally recognized there as well. And the cases of ICWA that most of these bureaucrats and these state and local governments find they don't have to abide by. It's appalling, and I don't understand where we're failing on that. And so the Indian Child Welfare Act, the Title II grants, these grants support tribal initiatives, establish child and family service programs. And of course, as you know, ICWA was enacted to protect the well-being and the best interest of Indian children. And currently the fiscal year appropriation for this program is only $16 million. I mean, we got money, we got $25 million going over to tribes in Central America, but we can't fund our ICWA programs at home. So the welfare assistance, child assistance payments, these programs provide temporary financial assistance for foster care placements, helping to ensure that our children have safe and stable environments during times of crises. The fiscal 2024 appropriation for welfare assistance, which includes child assistance payments, is only $78,494,000. Social service children to our elderly and families. This funding supports productive service for at-risk children and families, offering preventive services that can reduce the need for out-of-home placements. The fiscal year 2024 appropriation for social service was only $52 million. That's grossly underfunded. And one of the ways the Catawba Indian Nation, through the grace of God and the blessing of having revenues, we've had to subsidize these programs with our revenue from our gaming facility, and we're glad to do it, but we need some help, you know, because that little bit of money, even though people think it's a lot, it does get stretched really thin, and so we want to support our programs with this. So the Indian Child Welfare Act of 638 authority. This allows tribes to contract with the federal government to administer child welfare programs directly, ensuring that culturally appropriate services are delivered efficiently. Well, they're not. ICWA also reaffirms the inherent rights of tribal nations to involve in child welfare matters involving their citizens. It ensures tribes can advocate for the best interests of their tribal members and protect their tribal children, which in the state of South Carolina it's failing, and in North Carolina. So the fiscal year 2024 appropriation for tribal government activity, which includes this program, was $398,987,000. So we'd like to see an increase to that, if you will. The Tiawahi initiative, while not a line item in the appropriation, the initiative has been instrumental in fostering holistic, culturally grounded service delivery. Continued support for this initiative strengthens tribal families and promotes self-sufficiency. This program is supported through annual appropriations language rather than a specific funding line. So hopefully we can get that fixed. So, back on the same subject, my next one is the recommendation regarding the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. I spoke about this last year. You know, we have a lot of family at that school that need to be repatriated back through to their respective reservations. And for the second year, of course, as I stated, I appear before you to call attention to the painful and unresolved legacy of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. While progress has been made, just a little bit, not a whole lot, Much more remains to be done to ensure the Native children lost at Carlisle are finally returned home to their reservation and families. The injustices committed under the federal government's assimilationist policies, remember it was kill the Indian and save the man, that was their motto, continue to affect Native communities, and we must take further action to bring accountability and resolution to this long-standing issue. For the Catawba Nation, this issue remains particularly personal, one of our own. Wade Ayers was sent to Carlisle as a young boy in 1903. Less than 5 months after his arrival, he died from complications associated with vaccinations. And so his grave, like many others, was mismanaged over the years, especially when the U.S. Army relocated the burial sites in 1927 without contacting any of the Native families. And so struggling to reclaim their ancestors and provide them with proper burials in their homelands. And so when we thought we located Wade Ayers, of course, as I testified last year, it was the remains of a 12-year-old child. He wasn't even in the grave that was marked. And we still haven't had any resolution as to where he's at. We can't get him to talk to us. And so for that reason, to address these ongoing concerns, I urge Congress to take the following action. Clarify NAGPRA's applicability to the U.S. Army. Make them do the right thing. Congress should amend NAGPRA to explicitly state that it applies to all federal agencies, including the Department of Defense and the U.S. Army, removing any ambiguity that allows agencies to claim exceptions. Direct appropriations for repatriation efforts. Congress should allocate specific funding to facilitate the repatriation of Native American remains from military-controlled sites, ensuring that financial constraints do not obstruct the compliance. Also, if the Congress could do this as well, you have to be a family member to ask for the repatriation of the remains. We need it to change to say Native American tribe, respectfully. Mandate a review of federal policies on Native American cemeteries. A government-wide review of policies governing Native American cemeteries under federal control, particularly those tied to boarding schools, should be conducted to promote accountability and adherence to repatriation obligations. Enhanced enforcement mechanisms. Strengthening NAGPRA's enforcement provisions should be a priority, including imposing penalties on federal agencies that fail to comply, so that tribal nations are not forced into lengthy legal battles to reclaim their ancestors, and at least $1.5 million should be dedicated to NAGPRA enforcement. Codified timelines for repatriation. Congress should establish clear timelines for repatriation requests under NAGPRA. And so our journey for Wade Ayers has been many years, and we still haven't had any results and finalization on that. And mandate annual reporting on compliance by federal agencies to prevent indefinite delays, as I just stated. Expand tribal consultation requirements. Legislation should require agencies such as the Army to consult with tribal nations before any excavation, relocation, or repurposing of sites containing Native American remains, ensuring that tribal voices are central in decision-making process. All right, so with that being said, one of the last things an immediate crisis has averted, this highlights the vulnerability of essential service to policy decisions that may not fully consider the unique obligations the federal government holds towards Native tribes. To prevent a similar situation in the future, I recommend that Congress does the following. Implement protective measures for essential tribal services, enact legislation safeguards critical services such as healthcare, education, law enforcement. Enhance consultation protocols, mandate that federal agency engage in meaningful and timely consultation with tribal nations before implementing policies that could affect the delivery of services in the Indian country. And lastly, affirm commitment to trust and treaty obligations, reaffirm the federal government's dedication to upholding its trust and treaty responsibility and providing consistent and adequate funding and support for programs serving Native American countries, thereby preventing future disruptions caused by administrative actions. So, by adopting these measures, Congress can help ensure the stability and the reliability of essential service for tribal nations, honor the commitments made through treaties and trust responsibilities. I think that was fast enough for you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. I know that 5 minutes doesn't seem like long enough, but as I said, we do take testimony. It's all of the testimony is in the record, and we do take it and read it, actually. So I appreciate all of you being here and your testimony. Very interesting, Corey, and a lot of the things that you had to say.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you as we try to solve some of these problems that obviously are across Indian country and have been forever. But is there any books about your tribe's history? I'm kind of a reading nut, so
I could definitely direct you to some things, and I just want to say that when they were Passamaquoddy warriors, they were always standing next to Penobscot warriors. Is that right, Chief?
Well, you are Penobscot.
Yeah.
But, so there's that's a good one. Yeah. On December 24th, 1776, you'll like this, the day before George Washington sailed across the Delaware River to surprise the British, he wrote a letter to the Passamaquoddy chiefs. You can find it in the Library of Congress website, and it just talked about, hey, we signed this treaty. Where are those warriors you guys promised me? And then the warriors followed, and this stuff it's been written on. Senator Collins does a great job of commemorating Wabanaki contributions to the American Revolution, I think, every summer. So there's a lot of great stuff. I'm a history buff, so call anytime. We can chat about it.
So if you come across any books that have the history, I would like to know that, because I read all this stuff, believe it or not. Maybe I need to get a life. I don't know, but I enjoy history and stuff. And when you were mentioning your tribe and the early history of it, I thought it would be an interesting book to read. So if you come across any, let me know. Okay.
I'll send something along.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. Shelley?
Thank you. Well, thank you to all of you, but especially to our two main tribes for being here. Really appreciate your testimony. I appreciated, too, that you were here to remind our colleagues of the important role that Maine tribes played in the Revolutionary War, and really our country owes a lot to them. And also, others of you have mentioned service throughout times. Tribal members play an important role in all of our military, including up to today. Thank you, Chief Francis, for reminding us that there are serious issues going on right now with the layoffs and the inability to access funding. Tribes are not DEI, environmental justice under the EPA. Many of these sort of buzzwords that get thrown around should not cover our tribal and treaty responsibility. And I think it's important for our colleagues to hear that, because although everything we do is underfunded and inadequate through here, we depend on those portals being open at the DHS and the EPA and Health and Human Services. All of these things are really vital funding sources, and we have been hearing really since inauguration about portals being closed and ability to access that funding. So thank you for continuing to remind us of that, and I think all of us have to stay vigilant about making sure that our other agencies that we don't have oversight are not shutting off funding or inadequately doing any of that. And same with the 638 cuts. I've heard worry about that, so we want to make sure. And the only other thing I just want to touch on, I know we don't have a ton of time, but, we talk a lot about law enforcement. It seemed like it was the theme of last year's hearings. Now we have, a little bit more to talk about with these other layoffs and cuts. But just a reminder that, most recent studies have shown we need over $1 trillion to adequately fund the needs of Indian country, and it's less than $300 million. So with Chief Cole here today, it's just another chance, maybe this is the year we could bump that up a little bit more. I know we're trying, whether it's in the court system or law enforcement. I had the chance to visit with you earlier. I guess that was this summer, and, just see one chief of police doing all of the work, and the way you've described sort of this bureaucratic back and forth. I mean, if we're going to clean up some bureaucracies, do you have federal training or state training, and you can't use these people? I mean, it was mind-boggling. So I think we can all work to include some of that language in there, and then just push a little harder there, because when you actually have a solution to something, the idea that, there's any blocking going on just for a bureaucratic argument that state and federal training aren't the same, and, that's ludicrous. And, of course, to have, your own chief having to fill in patrol duty with all the other responsibilities the chief has, also ludicrous. Same with ICWA, that came up quite a bit, not enough funding there. And this could be a good year to bump that up a bit. These things are all, tied together between law enforcement and adequate support. So, obviously, there's a million things you guys brought up during your testimony. We could keep talking, but I think we could try to focus on some of those. And thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for the good dose of Maine history, and we'll make sure that the chair has a stack of books to read to inform us all. But thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate it. And Chairman Cole, I know he never hears from me or you about.
Yeah, I was going to ask my good friend, the gentlelady from Maine. She is my good friend. Last time you asked me for more money, did you get it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We did.
So I just want to make that point, and I was happy to do that. because, look, I value this committee, both the chairman and the ranking member. Honestly, my good friend, the ranking member, has been chairman here before. I know what her record on Native American issues is across her career. So this is a committee I trust. If you give more money, it's going to get to where they tell you it's going to get to. A couple things and then a couple quick questions. But number one, and I say this, I'm not pointing partisan fingers in any way, shape, or form. This committee did a really good job. We did get it extra money last year, and they put it exactly where they said, and it was in Indian country. Right now, that bill is hanging fire because we have not passed. We've passed the bill across the House floor, thanks to Chairman here. We didn't get a single appropriations bill across the floor of the United States Senate last time, not one, dealing with anything. So our bills got across the floor, and we're in negotiation now. And we are at a point where we have no disagreements on money right now. We'll just tell you that. So if we can come to a larger deal, there are other issues that are beyond money. If we can come to a larger deal, what the hard work of this committee did will happen. And those additional funds will be there. If we can't, then we won't, and we'll be flat funded for another year, and you'll fall a little bit further behind. And I'm really worried that could happen. And again, I don't blame anybody for this. There's nobody on this committee that has anything to do with this. But my fellow appropriators, Democrat and Republican, our job is to fund the government. Our job isn't to pass all the laws and everything else. It's to fund the government. But we're caught up in disputes beyond simply funding that get in the way of larger negotiations. I actually think my fellow appropriators on both sides of the aisles in both chambers have basically done most of their work, but we need some help in other parts of the Congress and from the administration to actually get to a final solution. And I can talk to all of you about that. I will say on a number of the issues, is it Chief or Chairman Harris? I'm sorry. Chief Harris. That's what I thought. Just so you know, and this committee is a funding committee. So a lot of what you talked about, which I agree with 100%, and by the way, our former congressional colleague and former Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, did a great job in finally getting some recognition at Carlisle. There's actually a memorial going there for the trauma that you talked about very movingly. So I know there's an effort to try and address those sorts of issues. But, you know, in terms of this committee, they don't have jurisdiction to do things with the U.S. Army. They don't fund the U.S. Army. And honestly, you know, probably the right place for that legislation to direct them would be either the Interior Subcommittee or the House Armed Services Committee. And again, I know they'll raise those issues to their colleagues, but, you know, we're basically a funding operation. We don't have the ability in this committee. Congress certainly has the ability to do what you're talking about, and we need to do that. And at least there's an awareness, and I think, again, Secretary Haaland, the former Secretary Haaland, deserves a lot of credit for that. She's did some amazing things, both in Congress and as Secretary, to everything from missing and murdered Indigenous women to the schooling issue, the boarding school issue, to things like this. She was a champion across the board to help us remember what's sometimes a very painful history to remember. But you're right to bring it up, and you should use every forum you have, and this is an appropriate forum. I'm just telling you to defend my colleagues up here. There's a limit to what they can do, the jurisdiction that they have. And they've done a good job on a bipartisan basis with the resources that they have. And believe me, they never stop asking for more, which is exactly what they should be doing. So that's number one. Number two, a couple of you mentioned, you were one of them, I think, Mr. Hinton, you did as well, but a number of you mentioned EQUA. I'm really interested in that. We have the same kinds of issues in Oklahoma. I think you're exactly right about the funding and exactly right about what is quite often an adversarial relationship with state and local officials who are not sensitive to the fact that you're talking about our heritage, our future, our culture, our children. And there's an appropriate role here for Congress and to play. You know, some people keep trying to push us out of that role. I'm very pleased that we've maintained it, but it needs to be better funded. If you have some specific suggestions for, you know, legal move, we've had efforts to, you know, get rid of EQUA, quite frankly, and I'm glad on a bipartisan basis those have been resisted by Congress. We want to keep that jurisdiction. We want to keep tribes involved in determining the future of their children. We've had court cases where states have gone to court to try and overturn ECWA, and so far we've been successful in defending that because, again, we think tribal communities have a legitimate role in determining the future of tribal children. That's their future. So if you've got specific changes in the law, I'm not going to ask you for them today, but I would invite you to let us know what they are. There are advocates for ECWA on both sides of the aisle across Congress. And the last thing I would tell you on a lot of these kinds of issues, honestly, there's not much partisan difference. I mean, I've always said tribal issues are not about partisanship. They're really about two things. Almost every issue gets down to one of two things. The first one is tribal sovereignty. Do you respect it or do you not? Do you understand it's part of the law of the land, it's in the Constitution, or do you not? And the second is the trust responsibility, which the United States government willingly assumed, usually in exchange for lots of land and reduced jurisdiction on the tribe's part. And I don't find those tend to fall very much along conservative, liberal, Republican, Democratic lines. They really are deep constitutional issues. And our biggest problem here tends to be a lot of our own members, particularly if they're not fortunate enough to come from states that have substantial tribal presence, don't know much about it. I mean, they're not opposed, they just don't know. I mean, if there's not an Indian community in your area, then you're not likely to know nearly as much about it as if you come from Oklahoma or Montana or Wyoming, or certainly Maine. Now, I'll conclude with one other remark. I can't say very much about the Revolution because we fought with the British. We thought it would be a really good idea to stop the whites at the Appalachians. So we were on the quote unquote the wrong side. But I'm certainly proud of you that did, and both of you speaking to that issue. Much more importantly, mentioned the enormous contribution Native Americans have made throughout their history to the United States military in terms of the rate of service in tribal communities is enormously higher than any other ethnic or racial group in the country. Not to disparage anybody's, ancestors or contemporaries who put on the service, the uniform of the United States and go into harm's way to protect all of us. But I'm particularly proud of the Native American tradition. All kinds of tribes all over America have this, and it's to be you guys are to be commended for bringing it up, reminding the rest of us and the rest of the country, and certainly in honoring your veterans. And we do have a deep obligation there. So I always like to say nobody's fought against, with, and for the United States of America more than Native Americans. So we've done them all, but mostly with and mostly for. Again, your tribes are to be commended for continuing that service. So thank you again. Thanks for being here, and thanks for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. So did Idaho. Do you have any questions? Thank you. One clarification. Did I hear you right did you say that the life expectancy of Native Americans has decreased by 6 years?
In the last decade, you said. Yeah.
In the last 10 years, yes. So at Penobscot,
right?
for example, I'm here today after burying one of my classmates on Saturday, so we're still averaging around mid-50s. Yeah, it's.
Thank you all for being here. Interesting. That's just not right. Anyway, thank you all for being here. We appreciate your testimony and look forward to working with you to solve these problems. Thank you. You bet. We now have Kathleen Woodenknife and Frank Starr comes out. What's that? Kathleen, you're first.
Mitakiapi, chante washte nape chuzapi. Kathleen Woodknife imachiapi ksto. Na wasulutawi. My name is Kathleen Woodenknife. My Indian name is Red Hail Woman, and I greet you all with a handshake and a good heart. I am the great-granddaughter of Peter Stans, who was a survivor of the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. My great-grandfather's birth name was Kills the Horse and stands for himself, and I just want to introduce that part of my family to you all, and thank you. I normally speak from my heart. If I speak from my heart, we'll be here all day. And so I'm going to speak with what was prepared for me within our culture. Our ancestors, they always took their time to talk. They always took their time to make decisions. With a time limit, I'm not going to be able to do that today, so I will read to you what we've prepared for my testimony for today. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the critical needs for enhanced funding for Indian country. Federally recognized tribes are facing increasingly difficult choices due to persistent underfunding in Indian education, healthcare, and law enforcement. These challenges are further compounded by the unpredictable freezes on federal funding, with restrictions on access to essential resources. While tribes welcome fiscal accountability, we urge Congress to ensure that funding decisions are made with transparency and consistency, not through arbitrary actions that jeopardize our communities. Congress support for co-stewardship and tribal land transfers. This administration and Congress have put a priority on reducing the federal footprint for tribes in rural parts of the country. This provides a unique opportunity for a win-win situation. We currently have a federal-state co-stewardship agreement and would like to propose that any excess federal lands be transferred back to the tribes, especially for lands that border traditional territories. With our Indian Health Service, the underfunding of Indian health services has resulted in millions, if not billions, of dollars in shortfalls. Tribes are left with an impossible decision: cover these deficits from our own budgets or lose critical health care services altogether. In the facility that is on our reservation I worked at one time, I am a former federal employee. We have lost a lot of our direct care, and a lot of our patients are sent to other hospitals throughout South Dakota. And this really affects our families because in our culture we all travel together, we support each other, and not having these services within our facility, it causes a big hardship on our families because they have to be sent to other parts of the reservation or off the reservation. The Supreme Court's decision in Becerra versus San Carlos Apache tribe made it clear that IHS must meet its financial obligation to tribes, yet despite the legal precedent, tribes are still forced into litigation to recover what is rightfully owed. While tribes must still fight for discretionary spending, the IHS need-based funding is estimates north of the $50 billion, far greater than $7 billion in flat funding Congress has appropriated over the last 2 years. We urge Congress to fund the Indian Student Equalization Program to at least $951 million. Law enforcement services. The Department of Justice requires that there be 2.8 officers per 1,000 people to maintain effective law enforcement in rural areas. Yet our tribe is funded for only 1/4 of that standard. Our law enforcement department is responsible for over 26,000 people across 1 million acres, yet we only have 24 funded positions and just 17 officers currently employed. The result? A public safety crisis that is devastating our communities, overwhelming our health care, our education system, and stifling economic growth. We have no officers for our federal schools, a BIA estimate $93 million a year needed. We request Congress to support the Tribal Law Enforcement and Parity Act, which would extend federal injury, death, retirement, and pension benefits to our tribal officers, a critical need for recruitment and retention of tribal officers. Our Tribal Law Enforcement Department has to cover a large land base, and the furthest community from our law enforcement services is 110 miles one way. With a large land base, it's really hard for them to cover all the communities. You have maybe 2 or 3 patrol officers on a night shift or per shift, and it's really hard. We have a lot of meth and alcoholism that requires both law enforcement and our health services, because a lot of those that are arrested have to be taken to our health service before they can be taken to jail to make sure that they are safe to be incarcerated. And so it's really hard. We don't have adequate equipment, we don't have adequate vehicles, and so it makes it really hard for us to have safety for our people. Our responsibility as tribal leaders is our next 7 generations and the safety of our communities and our people, which is very difficult to do lacking the resources. So we do ask for an increase in funding for our law enforcement services. So in conclusion, because I'm watching the little clock in front of me, so I'm kind of starting to rush through. The challenges we face, whether in healthcare, education, law enforcement, or economic development, are not new, but they are urgent. We request the federal government to honor its commitments and ensure the tribes have the resources necessary to provide for our people. Finally, the interior budget is less than 5% of the federal government's budget. Please do not let the cuts affect Indian country. On behalf of Indian country, I urge this committee to act decisively. The time for change is now. Yesterday we read that the credit cards would be cut to $1, where they could use the credit card for law enforcement services. The credit card amount would be reduced to $1. That would have a bad impact on us because you have to have that credit card in order to have gas to get to all the areas throughout Indian country. So I just wanted to mention that. It wasn't a part of this, but it was something that I seen this morning. I have a lot more to say, but oh, you're giving me 2 more minutes?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Because I also wanted to touch on the Bureau of Indian Education funding. The funding disparity in Indian education is staggering. For the past 2 years, Congress has flat-funded Indian students at only $1.6 billion, which is an average of $6,910 per pupil, while state-funded students receive $16,080, and Department of Defense schools receive $25,000 per student. Yet just 2 weeks ago, the House Oversight Committee held a hearing in which this administration admitted to a $6.6 billion backlog in school construction and $1 billion backlog in school operation and maintenance. At St. Francis Indian School, we received just over $9 million in student funds, far short of what is needed. Worse yet, these funds are being stretched beyond their intended purpose, covering areas like school facilities, student nutrition, and school security that are already underfunded. The chronic underfunding of Indian education is unacceptable. If we are serious about the future of Indian country, we must invest in our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. President Frank, you're up.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, Chairman Simpson and ranking members. You know, I want to start off by saying my name is Frank Starr Comes Out. I'm the current president of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I'm also a veteran, a Marine combat veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I served in Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and also Operation Restore Hope, Mogadishu, Somalia. I served the country proudly as a machine gunner and a marksmanship instructor. And I'm very proud of what I did for this country, but also I'm also proud of what I did for my own people and what I'm currently doing. This is my second term in office. I just started my second term, and you know I came here to tell you like it is for us in Indian country. You know, my tribe has 54,000 membership and growing on a 3.3 million acres. And I know some of you've been here to witness my last testimony because I recognize some of you. You know, a lot of things that are happening on our reservations. And I want you to know that, you know, we have two challenges as being tribal leaders. We man our own government, and we have to figure out things. We're huge tribes for large land-based tribes. We have a large population and a large area to cover as far as roads, schools, things like that. And on top of that, we have to come here and fight for funding for our people. And that's the important thing you need to know, the challenges we face, because we face challenges every day. You know, my tribe, we have over 66 programs that are tailored to meet the needs. But as you know, the funding is just not there. One thing I'd like to also mention is, you know, I came here to speak on treaties. Because treaties, you know, Article 6 are the supreme law of the land. And today, in this current administration, I believe those treaties are being violated and challenged today with this new administration. And I'd like to see that change. You know, it affects our people when we're threatened with reduction in force as far as those basic treaty needs that are obligated to us, such as BIA, IHS, BIE. Those are treaty rights. And you need to understand that those are in violation of our treaties. And today, we have membership here. It's critical. It's detrimental to our programs, our people. And when those programs are affected, and ultimately it causes death. And that's what we're seeing here. Because when you take away those employees from those programs, our people have nothing to go or to look forward to seek help. You know, I've received a lot of calls, you know, from government employees from the BIA, Department of Interior, IHS employees, all asking the tribes to fight for them, stand up for them. That's what we're here for today, to ask you. You know, I've been coming here for a few years now and voicing my concern. And I want to tell you something. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. And I hear the ranking members here tell us that they are aware of the treaty obligations not being met. But we're not doing anything about it. Why is that? You know, I fought for my country because I believed in my country. Now I'm fighting for my people, and I believe in my people need to be heard. What are we going to do about our treaty obligations that are so severely underfunded? And one thing I want to point out, and this kind of made me curious, is the root of the problem with our law enforcement. I came and advocated time after time, my first administration and now rolling into my second administration, our treaty obligations, and that is law enforcement. We had to take the government to court because of the lack of treaty obligation in law enforcement. And as you heard here from everybody else, we're severely underfunded, but we're not doing anything about it. And one thing is I noticed is the Congress decision to let DOJ law enforcement grants expire in the late 90s is a big factor of this. And why are we so underfunded? Why are we only operating at a 15% is beyond me. You know, I talk to my congressionals, and they tell me that there's an increase in law enforcement, but to large tribes, that doesn't matter. That's pennies for us. It don't even come close. We need large land-based treaty tribes. We need a separate, we need to separate from small tribes. You cannot put us together as one and call it good. Tribes are different. And as you can see, and I'm not going to read all my data because you have it all. And just like I told Secretary Garland in the last administration, you have all our data. And I was upset because he came to listen to us and hear our problems. But the Oglala Sioux tribe's data sitting on his desk and not I was going to cuss, but I'm not going to go there because there's no action. I see no action. And that's why I'm here today. I also want to mention, you know, some of the things, you know, that need to be addressed is IHS, our educational department, and transportation. I just want to mention those things because, you know, freezing our grants is a violation of treaty rights. So we need to do something about that. And our education department is, we're threatened. And you'll hear that testimony on Thursday from one of our experts for Indian country, Miss Cecilia Fire Thunder. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. And first, let me say thank you for your service to your people, and thank you for your service to our country. Very much appreciated and respected. We have been, Tom and I can't remember who, I think Betty was the ranking member at the time, McCollum, and we've been and visited, I think, all the reservations in South Dakota, and very interesting and so forth. But when you say you're here fighting for funding for your tribes for their treaty obligations and that kind of stuff, the people in Congress that are doing the same thing are sitting at this table. And we will continue to do that. And while it may not seem that there is anything happening, we've actually made some pretty good progress in moving us in the right direction. It's not going to happen that it's going to occur overnight. What matters in this world is what direction you're headed. And we are headed in the right direction. Long way to go, yes, I agree. But we're going to do all we can to make sure that we can meet those obligations that I think most of us at this table feel that we have. And I'm certain that you feel that we have. And so we're going to continue to fight for those things in Congress. So, but I understand where you're coming from. Don't disagree with when you have obligations, you kind of sit there and go, why should it take any time at all to meet those obligations? Because they're obligations. It is challenging. Sure.
If I may respond to that, you know, we don't expect it to happen overnight. We expect you to listen to us and give us some kind of assurance that these things are happening. to hear us out, to come visit our tribal nations, to experience firsthand. These are third world countries that we live in. You know, we didn't ask for this way of life.
Yep.
We were forced. We went, and we did not surrender. We signed peace agreements.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it very much, and thank you, Kathleen, for your testimony. Shelley?
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your service, and thank you both of you for standing up for the people you represent and the tribal and treaty obligations. And I wholeheartedly agree that we are not meeting those obligations. We haven't been meeting them before, and we're facing another crisis with the staffing cuts and the funding cuts that have already happened, with blocking many of the sources of tribal funds at the BIA, but also beyond that. And so you're right to talk about another crisis, and right to talk about the deep inadequacy of the amount of funding that Congress provides. So I am also concerned. The priority of this new administration coming in will be sending more money to the border, sending more money to defense, tax cuts, which many of us won't agree with. And it seems to me in those priorities, one of the priorities should be adequately funding our treaty and tribal obligations. And when we talk about things like law enforcement and the deep inadequacy of how much money that we send, or education or Indian health, we have to make sure that there aren't cuts experienced there to fund those other priorities of this administration. I think that's our obligation in this committee, and I know I, for one, will be fighting back. And I agree with the chair. This is a committee that works hard to increase that funding, but we're usually only able to do so with such small increments. It's barely felt. And as you said, with tribes with big numbers and big amount of land, it really doesn't make a dent. So you have my commitment to keep working with you, and I really appreciate that you're here today and really sounding an alarm. Thank you for that.
I just want to say one last thing. I have I've sat on tribal council for 7 years, and I'm the first female president for our tribe, and I've made history. I want to remain optimistic that this committee can make changes, because in the past, when I first became a tribal council representative, I did give testimony on behalf of the Indian Health Service, and it did help. So I'm going to remain optimistic that listening to us today, that we can move forward in a good way into the future for our people, because as a compassionate woman, I stand strong for our tribe. And I thank you for today.
Thank you. Before I move on to the next panel, I did want to, because we're hearing a lot of this today, and rightfully so, it's obviously of concern to everybody, and it's a concern to both Republicans and Democrats in this thing. But first of all, the funding freeze. We're continuing to monitor the administration's actions related to the funding freeze. From my conversations with the administration, I understand that all annual discretionary interior appropriations funding for the Indian Health Services and DOI Indian Affairs has been unfrozen. I'd note that there is still some Inflation Reduction Act and Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding that is frozen within Indian Affairs, and the agency is working diligently to get all of those funds unfrozen. The subcommittee is monitoring the situation very closely and will continue to work with the agency to address these issues. We understand the impact that it will have in Indian country. The agency layoffs and resignations and retirements, and we understand that the Department of Interior, there were several Indian Affairs personnel that fall under the probationary category that were fired. However, we have confirmed that none of those personnel were law enforcement. For the Indian Health Services, the layoff offer was quickly rescinded, so IHS did not lay off any employees because of this initiative. As with most agencies, Indian Affairs and Indian Health Services do expect there to be some people that will be deferred, take the deferred resignation offer to retire before the end of the year. While we are hoping that staff retention is not detrimentally impacted, this type of thing is not completely out of the ordinary during a change in administrations. But having said that, I understand the concern that is out there, and rightful concern. We're trying to make sure that it doesn't impact Indian country. So we're going to do all we can to make sure that happens. Frank, did you want to say something?
Yes, real quick, and thank you for reading that. I also read that, but I wanted to put it on record that this needs to be addressed, and thank you for reminding me that, reminding all of us for that
Okay. Thank you.
reassurance.
Thank you for being here today and testifying, and beautiful country up there. Yep, we need to get back there. It's before COVID that we were out there, so. Yeah. Thank you. We now have Ryman LeBeau, Janet Alcree. Don't know if I pronounced that right, but Alkire? Okay. Just like it's spelled. You'd think I'd figure that out. Huh? This afternoon, when the Montana tribes are here, I'm going to have Zinke do most of them for the Montana tribes. But
Because I told you stuff and I wanted to be able to cover for you, and they're using it land, so
well, I know.
work on that.
So if we need anybody. Thank you for being here. Ryman, you're first.
These on?
Yep.
Okay. Right on. Omadakiapi, Yuha Chante Washtenape Chuzaplo. I'm Ryman LeBeau. I'm the chairman of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. And in our language, I said I welcome you with a good heart. Shake your hand with a good heart. And I thank the committee, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and the other committee members. And I want to thank you for having these hearings and inviting these tribal leaders in to testify. And I'm glad you heard from Oglala and Rosebud, and you're talking to Cheyenne River and Standing Rock. You know, we all have large land base, which is a blessing for us. And Cheyenne River actually has the largest land base of the Sioux nations. We're the fourth largest tribe in land base wise in Indian country. And with that, we experience barriers because of that. You know, that we're blessed to have that, but with that comes issues like with law enforcement. Law enforcement is a very vital program for our people. The current number of law enforcement officers is 16, and that's just not enough to cover the reservation. And you've been there, Mr. Simpson and Mr. Cole, and you've come out to Cheyenne River and you've seen how vast and big it is. It's the size of Connecticut. And with those 16 officers, only 3 of them per shift, and that's due to the BIA funding. They're just not enough to fund our law enforcement. And I know the other tribes have similar issues when it comes to law enforcement, and we do agree throughout our region that we need more officers, tribal police officers, to cover our reservations. So that's an issue, a priority for us to hold. Another priority is the a new school. We're right now we're on top of the list for a new school with BIE, Bureau of Indian Education. And it's due. Our school is in tough shape. There were times when the boiler went out, the kids had to wear their jackets to school all day. Space heaters were brought in, but things like that happened. The school is over 60 years old, and it was not built by the BIA. It was built by the Army Corps of Engineers when they flooded us off our lands. Along the Missouri River. So it's time that the BIE gives us a new school, and we need $503 million to build that school. Currently, before the freezes, our treasurer was able to download to gather, draw down all the monies for the design, which was $26 million. Very expensive design due to the inflation and current costs of of the planning and architecture and engineering. So, so anyways, we have part of it planned. We have the money now to continue that planning and finish the design. So, so we're looking forward to that. And I know the other tribes have needs for new schools as well. So, the magic number for construction is $503 million. Indian Health Service, you know, we need to see more programs that focus on prevention of all the sicknesses that currently turn fatal on us. There's heart disease, there's lung disease, there's cancers, there's diabetes, cirrhosis. All these illnesses can be prevented with the proper programs in place and the proper funding for that. We have issues with alcohol, drugs. We're going to start our own treatment center this spring. 9 men, 9 women treatment center with the detox, medical detox built in. So, but we do need a dedicated funding for treatment and funding for health and wellness centers. We're working on creating our own health and wellness center, and we just need dedicated funding for that through IHS. The housing, we face a lack of housing throughout our region. At Cheyenne River, we're at 628. More houses is needed, and we know that the Appropriations Committee, DOI, BIA has the Housing Improvement Program, which is really a great program for tribes, our tribe included. So we could use that increase in funds for that program. And we're you know, currently, I know they probably told you, but the RIFs, the Department of Government Efficiency, is causing a lot of havoc and issues with our programs, with our Indian programs. The United States fulfills its trust and treaty obligations through both direct delivery of tribal programs and services and through provision of federal funding to tribal nations and tribal organizations serving tribal nations. So when they do these cuts, these rifts, these layoffs of probationary employees, whether it's at Haskell Indian Nations University or at SIPI, or anywhere in the BIE or BIA, that is creating issues with the federal government in carrying out its treaty and trust responsibility to tribes. So we need these programs. Hopefully you can exempt them from what is happening now. So we thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Janet, you're up.
Hey, honey, wash day. Please forgive me. I am getting over a cold, so my voice sounds really terrible. Terrible today. But I want to appreciate the committee and for all my relatives that are coming today to testify. I think I see a lot of themes or a lot of issues that are basically the same. But I'll read my testimony because I think it's important to do that. But good morning, Chairman Simpson and ranking members of the subcommittee. My name is Janet Elkar. I am the chairwoman of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. I'm honored to provide this testimony on behalf of my ancestors, our people back home, and for generations to come. Standing Rock signed treaties with the United States in 1851 and 1868. Today we have more than 16,000 members, with about half living on our reservation. Our 2.3 million acres is the size of Delaware and Rhode Island combined. But after decades of chronic underfunding, we lack the basic infrastructure, law enforcement, healthcare, social services, veteran services that every government needs. We paid for these programs and services through the lands and resources we ceded in treaty. Our treaties brought peace, and we were promised services and protection. It is time for the United States to live up to its treaty and trust responsibilities. My testimony focuses on law enforcement, healthcare, but I need to start with the administration's reckless firing of BIA, BIE, IHS staff that provide programs to our services to our members. The subcommittee must stop the irresponsible management of the United States treaty and trust responsibilities. Indian programs must be exempt from these firings. BIA, BIE, and IHS employees touch every part of our lives and every tribal project. They are already underfunded and understaffed. Each employee is already doing the work of 4 people. Losing just one federal employee can bring our government to a halt or threaten life-saving health care. We agree that reforms are needed, but firing the staff that serve our tribes without any consultation or plan violates the United States treaty and trust responsibilities. Funding and staffing Indian programs and services must be mandatory. Treaty programs and services cannot be subject to changing politics. The federal government is already failing to provide law enforcement and health care promised in a treaty. I'll start with law enforcement. Our people do not feel safe in our homes. Our communities are overrun with drugs and the violent crime that comes with drugs. Criminals and drug cartels know that we don't have the resources to fight back. The subcommittee must increase BIA law enforcement budget by 3 to 5 times, and this funding must get to large land-based tribes like Standing Rock. We have only 7 patrol officers. We are authorized 30 patrol officers, but the subcommittee does not provide the funding we need. Most of the time, we only have 1 or 2 officers on duty covering the area of 2 small states. To solve this problem, we need a second BIA police academy in the Great Plains. We need homegrown law enforcement. Currently, the only BIA police academy is in the Southwest. This is too far away and cannot keep up with the demand. The subcommittee must fund the creation of a new BIA police academy in the Great Plains to address the shortage of law enforcement. Our officers are exhausted and feel unappreciated, which leads to burnout, poor morale, turnover, and making the problem even worse. In addition to police officers, our BIA detention center is more than 60 years old and needs to be replaced. Anywhere else in the United States, this facility would be condemned. On our reservation, it is our only option. Just last week, the boiler stopped working. It was 39 degrees below zero. Our judge was forced to release 39 nonviolent detainees. The rest of the detainees were about to get bused to another facility more than 3 or 4 hours away when we finally got the heat back on at 2 in the morning. Just like our detention, our hospital is also 60 years old. It is the oldest facility in the Great Plains and lacks life-saving equipment found at every hospital. So I guess I want to ask that the subcommittee take bold action to address the chronic underfunding of basic infrastructure and services. The subcommittee should make funding for Indian programs and services mandatory, exempt BIA, BIE, and IHS for these reckless firings, and fulfills full staffing. These programs and services were secured by our ancestors in treaties with the United States, and these commitments must be fulfilled. I want to thank you for allowing me to testify. It's my first time. Then I get a cold. So.
That's the way it always works out, isn't it?
I loved how you all talked about a little history, and I love how President Wood and I said she speaks with her heart. I got the chance to speak at her inauguration, and I told her, because she was saying she gets nervous, I said, always just speak from your heart. That's what our people need to hear. Yep. Our people just need to hear the truth, and always showing compassion is the best way. And I appreciate the committee's compassion, because I do believe that you are working hard, and compassion is basically putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So I am so appreciative that you have done that. The history, though, is I am the first elected woman of Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. But we had the first woman of the chair of Standing Rock in the 50s was a woman. And she was appointed by the BIA to a 1-year term. And so whenever I have get discouraged, I think of Josephine Kelly in the 50s, who was the first chairwoman. And I can't complain, because she was only given 1 year to do what she needed to do and advocate for her people. So I'm grateful and honored to be here. So
Well, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
thank you both for being here. When we were out there and visited the reservations in South Dakota, it was, I mean, these are large land reservations and stuff. In fact, it was just a few months before we got there that I'm not sure if it was Rosebud or the other reservation that an officer was called to domestic violence, actually got in a wreck and died getting there. But it was a domestic violence call. It would have been 45 minutes to an hour before he could get there, and he was obviously driving too fast on the roads that were, trying to get there. But, 45 minutes to an hour later, it's over.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, why go then, it just shows the lack of officers that we have on these large land-based tribes, as well as other tribes. But you particularly see it on some of these tribes. But in Eagle View, it was there, when we were there, there was a problem with the pumping station and stuff.
Yeah.
They got that all fixed. And,
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
That was they couldn't build more houses because the pumping station had frozen during the winter and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, exactly, yeah. And we got it running, and we have plenty of water now. We just need the home sites, the hookups,
Yeah.
and the funding to make those houses, build those houses. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for your testimony. Shelley?
Share one more thing.
Sure.
Yesterday I was coming, I flew in, but Sunday I had a meeting with the FBI because I knew I was going to be here this week, and I was here last week. And we had a situation come up, and I said, well, they have to work 7 days a week just like me. I'm going to call them in, so they had to come in from Bismarck. So I sat down with the FBI because the violence and drugs are so bad on Standing Rock. On Christmas Day, we had a young lady stab her mom, and they were both, those drugs.
Yeah.
And but the stories I heard that were sent to me while I was gone, so it is dire. It is very dire. So I'm glad all the tribes are speaking on this issue, and I'm really glad that the committee is hearing this. Law enforcement is so critical right now.
Well, thank you. Shelley?
Yeah, thank you both for your testimony and really reminding us of the challenges of a state where there's so much land area, in particular with the tribal jurisdictions, and how hard that is to cover. I hope we can do everything we can to get your school across the finish line. We've heard a lot of talk already today, and we know how important education is, and having those facilities where a kid feels like, I'm in a school, I'm respected because this is good facilities and good equipment, I think makes a huge difference in the quality of their education, as well as making sure you get adequate teachers. And congratulations on your role. First woman in that job. Many of us know what it's like to push forward as a woman in roles that haven't been taken before, but yours is particularly dramatic, and I'm sure that the woman who served for 1 year would be very proud, to know you're there today, and that, it says a lot that you were put there, elected by the people who you represent, and that they have great faith in you, and you've both testified very movingly about really how dire the situation is. Year after year, we are reminded on this committee that we just don't come close to meet the need, particularly on things like law enforcement and Indian health, and I think with the current challenges and the chaos that's going on with the firings or the portals that aren't available for funding that should be there, some of it we'll be able to work through, and I think the advocacy of this committee will go a long way with the new secretary, just reminding him that these are treaty and tribal obligations. We can't be cutting this personnel, and I thought it was particularly meaningful that you said, just sometimes one person, and people think, well, what's one person? We got to fire thousands in the government. Well, one person might be the one that you have the contact with and helps you to make sure you get that grant or that funding, and we need to be reminded of that each one of these positions is vital. Most of the departments are already dramatically understaffed, and so to lose more is just wrong. So thanks for spending your time with us today.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your testimony and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
You bet. Next we have Stephen. Pronounce it for me. Say it again. Orihuela. Okay. Okay.
I don't blame you for not trying to
Yeah,
pronounce it.
I was going to say, I would destroy it if I tried. Charles Martin, Erica Pino, Cecilia Flores.
Scoot over one. Want to shift over? Oh.
Stephen, you're first up.
All right, thank you. A little nervous here, first time doing it.
We're just talking across the kitchen table.
All right. Well, good morning, Honorable Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. Inanine Stephen Orihuela. My name is Stephen Orihuela, and I am the Pogonovi of the Bishop Paiute tribe. Pogonovi means chairman. Our community is one of the many Paiute tribes across the nation. Before the colonial period, we controlled vast stretches of land in California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and Oregon. Our sovereign control over much of that land was lost, but our cultural ties to the plants, animals, and changes of the season remain strong as they ever were. Today, my 2,200 plus tribal members are still connected to the land and water of the eastern Sierra Nevada mountain range. Bishop Paiute tribe is the 7th largest tribe in California. Even though our trust land is limited to a fully developed approximately 900 acres adjacent to the city of Bishop, our elders still visit the sacred sites we lost in Inyo County and the Sierra Nevada National Forest, and on lands owned and managed by the BLM. Our relationship with the Forest Service and the BLM is cordial and cooperative, but the time has come for that relationship to evolve. President Trump has put a priority on reducing the federal footprint. For tribes in rural parts of the country, this provides a unique opportunity for a win-win situation. Tribal governments as independent sovereign nations are in a perfect position to receive, manage, and where appropriate, develop excess federal land. Near the Bishop Paiute Reservation, we have identified more than a few dozen parcels of land that are excess to the needs of the Department of Interior or the Forest Service. Now is the time to move this land out of federal control and put it back into the hands of the original stewards of the valley. Our people are good stewards of the land. We live in balance with nature. We protect the culturally significant animals on our land, including pahavichi, that's bear, tahita, deer, and pugwi, fish. And we proactively manage the forest so that wildfires do not devastate our community. To put it bluntly, tribal management of this land would be better for our community. The Bishop Paiute tribe, and I suspect many other tribes across the nation, would happily take control of marginal federal lands and put them to beneficial use. We stand ready on our own to own that land in fee or preferably in trust. And so I look forward to working with the new administration to facilitate land transfers. Along with the land, water is a priority for the Bishop Paiute tribe. The 5 Owens Valley Paiute tribes have a water settlement assessment team, and we are working diligently toward a settlement with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I ask that the committee continue to fund this important work. I also want to thank the committee for its support of tribal law enforcement in the PL 280 states. I commend the decision to include a pilot program for tribes impacted by this law, but urge lawmakers to go further. All tribes deserve the ability to protect our citizens from violent crime. I also wanted to speak to early Head Start funding. It is crucial to maintain funding or to increase funding to these tribes or tribal organizations. Situated in a rural area, it's really hard to remain competitive, to keep staffing at a sufficient level to meet the needs of our children. So if we're able, I urge Congress, everyone, to maintain the funding or increase it. By doing so, we are placing that investment in the future of our kin, our future, and that's really at the heart of education, in my opinion. In addition, I also urge lawmakers to adopt inclusive definitions that recognize tribes, tribal organizations, and urban Indian organizations as part of a unified IHS, Tribal 638, and Urban Indian Health Programs, ITU, the system of care. With my remaining time, I want to address the funding freeze. When the United States enters into agreement to provide appropriate funds, it is critical that the administration lives up to that commitment. Nothing less than the American people's faith in government is at stake here. I understand that this administration has different priorities than the last one. That's no surprise. The American people elected a new president from a different party. There was an expectation that things would change. But withholding funds that were duly awarded is punishing grant recipients for playing by the rules, and that needs to stop. Finally, I want to acknowledge the words of Secretary Burgum that he mentioned. Tribes are not part of DEI, and that's important to reiterate. Tribes are governments, just like states and counties are governments. The Department of Interior and Department of Health and Human Services have clearly stated there will be no categorical repudiation of funds for tribes, but other departments within your jurisdiction have not. So we urge them to take that into serious consideration. And please continue to work with the administration on this issue. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with you. Manahuvu, that means thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm just going to go down the line if that's okay. Cecilia?
Hello, my name is Cecilia Flores. I'm the current chairwoman for the Alabama-Coushatta Tribe of Texas. We're located in East Texas, north of Houston, about an hour. And thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. And on behalf of the Alabama-Coushatta Tribe of Texas, I wish to address a matter that our tribal nation has been trying to resolve with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the United States Department of Interior, since 2013. It is not a trivial matter because it involves our tribe's ability to receive federal funding to support our tribal law enforcement activities to protect our tribal nation. I would like to briefly review our history of our tribe's federal recognition. In the 1850s, the Texas legislature passed legislation authorizing the purchase of land to serve as home for both the Alabama and the Coushatta tribes of Texas, in Polk County, Texas. Those lands form our original reservation, and we currently occupy those lands today. We currently have approximately 11,000 acres and 1,435 tribal citizenships. On May 29, 1928, Congress passed legislation granting federal recognition to our tribal people. However, the tribe's federal recognition was short-lived. On August 23, 1954, our federal recognition was terminated and trust responsibilities was transferred to the state of Texas. In 1983, the Texas Attorney General for the state issued an opinion that stated that it was unconstitutional for Texas to have a trust responsibility with our tribe and that the tribe was merely an unincorporated association under Texas law with the same legal status of other private associations. In 1987, the federal recognition was restored to the Alabama-Coushatta tribe. Now, the issue at hand, prior to 2013, my tribe received 638 funding to support our law enforcement efforts. In that year, Regional Director for the Southern Plains BIA office informed our tribe that it is his belief that there was no federal criminal jurisdiction on our reservation land. Therefore, he concluded that our tribe was ineligible to receive 638 funding to support our tribal police force. Such a statement was all the more remarkable because at the time of the passage of our Restoration Act, the General Accounting Office confirmed that the U.S. would maintain concurrent jurisdiction on the Alabama-Coushatta tribe. At the tribe's request, the regional director asked for the solicitor for an opinion regarding whether there was concurrent federal criminal jurisdiction on our tribe's land. And as I sit here today, over 11 years since we have made this request, the Office of Solicitor has yet to issue an opinion. As directed by our Restoration Act and was allowed under the 1968 version of Public Law 280, Congress specifically carved out civil and criminal jurisdiction over gaming matters in our Restoration Act, making such matters the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. Under these facts, the state of Texas' assumption of civil and criminal jurisdiction over the Alabama-Catawba Tribes trust land does not preclude the United States from exercising concurrent criminal jurisdiction over crimes occurring on the reservation under either the General Crimes or Major Crimes Act. It is worth noting that the Restoration Act, which also restored federal recognition to the Isleta del Sur Pueblo in El Paso, Texas, also placed the Pueblo under in 1968 version of Public Law 280. And the BIA Southwest Regional Office has deemed the Pueblo eligible for 638 law enforcement funding, and the Pueblo is receiving such funding. To date, the Solicitor's Office still has not issued an opinion and to the question of 638 funding for the Alabama-Catawba Tribe of Texas law enforcement, and it has remained unresolved. We have grown weary in trying to resolve this matter with the BIA and the Solicitor's Office, and we now ask Congress to take appropriate action to secure funding in support of our law enforcement efforts. On behalf of the Alabama-Catawba Tribe of Texas, I appreciate the opportunity to raise this issue with the committee and appreciate your consideration for our requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Charles?
Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, committee members. My name is Charles Martin. I'm Chairman of Morongo-Bannock Mission Indians located in Southern California. To begin, I want to emphasize, again, as Stephen had mentioned, emphasize the difference between tribal programs and preference from DEI initiatives. Programs that serve tribes are a fulfillment of a legal treaty and trust obligation that the federal government must uphold. They are not diversity initiatives based on race, but legal obligations that have been upheld for centuries at every level of our judicial system. And that was recently the ICWA case that went before the Supreme Court. Was recently upholding that the tribes are not just a race of people. We should not have to remind the federal government of these responsibilities, but the funding freeze and more recently the firing probationary federal workers serving tribes has necessitated these comments. I encourage the subcommittee and Congress to include language in this year's appropriation bills that specifically exempt tribal programs from funding freezes, hiring freezes, and sequestration. Tribal communities have faced and survived countless attempts to erase our culture and our governments, and the consequences of these actions are still being felt today. Congress passed the Indian Child Welfare Act to stabilize our communities and keep Native children within their culture. Today, it is the gold standard of child welfare laws, and we ask Congress continue to fund the Child Welfare Act and social services grant programs such as the Indian Child Welfare Act grant program, the BIA Welfare Assistance Program, and the BIA Social Services Program. These programs provide assistance to families so that they can be reunified when appropriate and even directly prevent the separation of Indian families in the first place. The Morongo tribe is proud to be a self-governance tribe, either compacting or contracting nearly every aspect of federal government services to the tribe. Unfortunately, the funding the tribe receives provides less than 1% of our governmental budget. This is woefully inadequate. We are fortunately able to supplement the funding with other federal grants as well as from our own tribal government general fund. But not all tribes are able to do this, and especially not at the outset of transition to self-governments. We are blessed, and we appreciate that, and to the extent that we can advocate for smaller tribes that don't have, Morongo is always going to step forward and say, hey, you know what, there are a lot of tribes out there that still need these funds. Congress needs to specifically increase baseline tribal program funding to both meet its treaty and trust obligations and allow more tribes to utilize self-governance program. Next, I would like to talk about the tribal law enforcement funding in Public Law 280 states. Although the goal of Public Law 280 was to improve public safety on tribal lands, Public Law 280 only made the problem worse by creating an unfunded mandate on states without any real oversight from the federal government. Whereas Public Law 280 was implemented, BI chose to defund tribal police. This has resulted in patchwork of public safety services on tribal reservations. What is wrong, I can tell you from experience, that we don't provide emergency services to our citizens, and many people visiting our reservations annually, and no one will. I'm currently working with the state of California to do training on Public Law 280. It's just as simple as training to know how to deal with the culture and the members on tribal property. So we are working on that. But again, that always, even with the local sheriffs, funding becomes an issue because training costs. The other thing is tribal court orders, not being honored, outside of the reservation, if you've got a tribal court. Those are just simple things. We supported the language included in the fiscal year 2023 omnibus and seek to provide funds to tribes the BIA has forgotten. But I am here to tell you that you need to go further. Every tribe must receive some BIA law enforcement funding so that they can protect our people. If the BIA won't allocate the money to keep us safe, you need to force them to do it. To that end, I ask you set a minimum allocation of $500,000 for each tribe within the BIA public safety line item. Lastly, I call on Congress and the committee to fully fund contract support costs and 105 leases and move them out of the discretionary budget of mandatory. The courts have already ruled that Congress is required to fully fund these accounts, and as a result, these line items eat up 85 to 90% of funding increases provided to tribal programming over the past decade. This is another one that's been won in court, and it goes without saying. That means that while Congress can brag about increasing funding for tribes, the reality is that we're not even keeping up with inflation. Shifting these payments to the mandatory budget would alleviate the perennial use and is long overdue. Thank you for the opportunity. I would also like to mention the direct pay program that was created by the Department of Treasury. A great program. It really allows us to do things, for infrastructure. I think at the end of the day, we are faced with the same problems that you guys have funding infrastructure in the Native community. If we don't have, a way to, generate those revenues for infrastructure needs such as roads and such, you really tie our hands. So, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Charles. Erica?
Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Erica Pinto, and I have the honor of serving as the tribal chairwoman for the Hamul Indian Village of California, an honor I've held for over 10 years, first woman elected for my tribe. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to testify on critical role of federal funding in supporting our tribe and tribal citizens. I've submitted written testimony that details the history of our tribe and the United States' trust responsibility to tribal nations as the basis for the federal funding our tribe receives. I plan to focus my remarks this morning on the importance of federal funding and the way it profoundly impacts the tribe by providing a few examples. First, as a government, we are planning now for an increased impact of unique challenges facing the tribe due to our location in Southern California. The recent wildfires plaguing the region, one of which put our reservation in dangerous proximity to evacuation, call attention to this issue. The tribe is using federal funds to investigate our current infrastructure and significantly improve the resilience of our electric grid, allowing us to better withstand natural disasters, ensure more reliable power access, and create potential economic benefits by mitigating disruption to critical services within our community. Scarce water resources are also an issue that has long impacted Southern California. We use federal funds to support water management projects that ensure water is conserved and used efficiently and to work to reduce the risk of drought and flooding. As the original stewards of this land, we know how best to manage it, as was said earlier, maximizing resources and benefiting the greatest number of people. Should federal funding that supports these efforts be paused, delayed, or eliminated, the tribe could no longer be proactive about the unique challenges we face. As noted previously, federal funding is necessary for provision of critical services for our tribal members. A key example is healthcare. American Indians face the worst health outcomes in the United States, from life expectancy to the rate of common ailments such as heart disease and diabetes. The tribe is part of a 7-member tribal consortium, the Southern Indian Health Council, that provides holistic care to tribal members and their surrounding. Anybody have a Kleenex? The surrounding community, advancing physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Thank you very much. Federal resources that Southern Indian Health Council receives are critically important to meeting the needs of the tribal community. We use funding and technical support diligently to improve health outcomes of communities we serve. Any pause or elimination in funds for American Indian healthcare would cripple our ability to provide essential healthcare services, thereby exacerbating the already poor health outcomes of American Indians. This is truly a life or death situation. Finally, I want to stress the role that federal funding plays in meaningful consultation, which is a core component of its sovereign to sovereign relationship with tribal nations. The state of California has the 5th largest caseload of missing and murdered Indigenous persons of any state in the country. I've been a lifelong vocal advocate for ensuring that tribal communities have access to adequate tools and resources to protect our own people, including through the enforcement of tribal laws. Given our proximity to the international border with Mexico, we're 30 minutes from the border. It is even more critically important. In short, we must ensure that our tribal law enforcement agencies and other tribal organizations, I feel like a hot mess this morning with this, I apologize, and our tribal organizations are best equipped to provide support and resources to victims and their families. Our communities need to be educated on the importance of safety for themselves, for their family, and for our people. There are many barriers to recognition of tribal law enforcement authority and access to relevant databases helpful in performing their responsibilities. By federal funding programs aimed at eliminating these deficiencies, we can ensure that federal and tribal law enforcement agencies and governments can meaningfully consult and collaborate to combat the MMIP epidemic. I have pride for my tribe, not just for our heritage and culture, but also for our resilience, our strength as a sovereign nation. I would be remiss not to recognize that our successes were not without their challenges, and we continue to face barriers to achieving self-sufficiency today. We appreciate the work of the subcommittee to break down these barriers. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to provide testimony about the importance of federal funding in Indian country, and I have provided just a few examples of how federal funding supports our tribe through the impact is profound. I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony today and working with us to try to solve these problems. I will tell you what really frustrates me. And it's something I've been trying to learn about for the last 20 years, I guess. But when we started holding hearings on the MMIW, women, it really came to a head, and it is frustrating as hell for me. And I realize not all tribes are the same. You know, you got the Navajo tribe and you have the Jamal Indian village. Not the same. They're different. They have different needs, et cetera, and I realize that all across the country. But damn it, there needs to be some consistency in law enforcement across the tribes. And what we heard during that hearing was, well, we're not sure who has jurisdiction there, and et cetera, et cetera. And it is frustrating to figure it. And I'm not suggesting that we blow the whole system up, but we need to sit down and figure out how we're going to solve this jurisdictional issue. And my personal feeling is that these are your tribes, your reservations. You have the right to do what you want to do as long as you have the resources to do it.
I don't think it's necessarily, because Morongo recently, we had a girl go missing, and she ended up being murdered. But it was really more of a lack of coordination on a different police agency. So Morongo has a police agency, reached out to the sheriff, because we contract with the sheriff. Yeah. But the incident didn't happen on the reservation, so it happened outside of the reservation. Yeah. But the family had contacted the police department, and it happened in another city. At the end of the day, again, it's just lack of cooperation, but we're getting there. And I think it's similar to what we did with the ICWA Act. When I say similar, at the end of the day, you just need to start collecting data to make sure that agencies are working together, and that when you got that data, say, well, clearly you guys ain't working with the tribes, and that would be the impetus for, hey, you know what? We've asked you to work with the tribes. We got the data that shows you're not working with the tribes. What's the problem?
Yeah. Well, and it's also, when you go around from reservation to reservation, it depends on the relationship sometimes that they have with county officials. And I've seen some county officials that are going, they're not trained and we're not going to give cross jurisdiction with them or anything else. Yeah. And others that work real great. But somehow we need to solve this problem if we're going to, and I don't think it's any buddy or agency's fault. It is just how things have developed over the years. And we need to re-examine if that's the best way to do what we're doing. It's just like I've had many tribes come to me and talk about, we could do a better job of delivering health services if you directly fund our tribe instead of going through IHS. And I brought that up with several tribes, and that might work better for some tribes and others maybe not. Maybe they don't have the infrastructure to do it. But is it a way to look at, see if we're doing the best we can with the resources we have and stuff? I don't know. But I'm one of those guys that's not afraid to look at different ways of doing things, because oftentimes we're just kind of stuck with what develops over the years. And it's a fascinating subject, but it's something that I think is part of the answer of solving a lot of these problems.
Based on that comment, we provide real estate services. Morongo provides real estate services for other tribes.
Yeah.
And it's you're right. There are some of the smaller tribes that don't have the infrastructure, the
Right.
technical expertise to be able to perform those functions. But given there are different tribal agencies, and Chairwoman Pinto here, it's her organization is evolving as well. Would be able to provide those services in the event that the federal government would want to contract with her, like the federal government contracts with Morongo to provide those services. I think there's a way of doing it. To your point, we just haven't sat down and contemplated or gone through the ideas to get there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And believe me, I'm not sitting here suggesting I have all the answers, because I don't have any of the answers. You all have the answers. It's whether we can sit down and talk about it and see if there's a better way to do things. Maybe there's not. I don't know. But anyway, thank you all for being here today. Shelley?
Yep. Yeah, I echo the chairman's thoughts and concerns, and thank you all for taking the time to talk about the unique issues of your own tribe. I was interested in your thoughts about some of the public lands that could be turned over to the tribes, and I always think that's a positive move, as you talked about, sort of the stewardship and particularly wildfire prevention, all those things. So, I'd like to sort of learn more about what roadblocks you're facing and what's standing in your way. Anything you want to just comment on now, we can do some research on it too.
Yeah, no problem. So back in the day, I'll say the Bishop Paiute tribe had about over 60,000 acres, and it was removed out of the tribe's hands by executive order in the early 30s or so. However, we have established co-management agreements with the BLM on those Chalk Bluff area, and we manage an endangered species, the Owens Valley pupfish. We were able to transplant them back to Bishop Paiute Tribe Reservation through a safe harbor agreement, which we was able to get accomplished and executed April of 2024. We did a welcome home ceremony of the fish, did all of that. We had U.S. Forest Service BLM officials there. So that right there is a testament to how we're able to successfully manage our homelands already. And, given the opportunity, if we're able to get land, as we all mentioned here, we've been here for since time immemorial, and we are able to manage, these lands in a competent way before the government got involved at any point. So, we've done it through co-management, and we'll continue to do that. But the tribe, in speaking to capacity, I think that the best way to address all of it is to, give funding directly to the tribes, because capacity is an issue. But if the tribes have that resource and they can work toward becoming self-sufficient, they can build their capacity up. So I think that would be the best way to approach that. Thank you.
Ranking Member Pingree, there are more and more tribes out there trying to do co-management agreements with the federal government. Chippewa is one of them. So it's a concept that is beginning to get legs. And I know that the tribes would love to work with the federal government on co-management agreements.
Yeah, maybe this is the time, particularly with the staffing cuts and the lack of funding, it's sort of a good argument for why not do more of that, and appreciate that. And thank you for the unique issues you're facing in Texas. And I know you've got some language in this appropriations bill, if we can ever get it over the finish line, but maybe we can just help to get that resolved so that you have the law enforcement that you need. So, yeah, every one of you had interesting testimony. Thanks for talking about that and a little bit about the health consortium you're doing with other tribes. I think that's also a unique and interesting arrangement we could learn more about. So thanks for all of your time. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Just real quickly, so are you waiting on a BIA solicitor's opinion or an interior solicitor?
BIA.
You've been waiting 11 years
Yes.
for an opinion
Yes.
on whether or not you're eligible for 628.
Yes.
11 years for an opinion.
Yes.
I can give you an opinion.
We wanted it in writing.
I know government's bad. I just hate to hear it's this bad. Cecilia, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. And on a much larger issue, first, the 6 years of decrease in life expectancy is worse than any other ethnic group in the country. I think I sent the article after Kirk mentioned that, then I looked it up, and it's atrocious, 71.8 in 2019 down to 65.2, which is 5 years less than the next worst ethnic group on life expectancy, which means it hit more Indians than anybody else, killed more Indians than anybody else, and it's truly tragic, so and part of that, health isn't just having a clinic or a hospital. Health is the opportunities that exist for employment and the stress that's related to the lack thereof, the despondency of the missing and murdered indigenous people, the fear that exists every day, the understanding that you don't know if you're going to be safe every day, and so it encompasses all those things. And I like your idea of, Erica and Charles, you both have casinos in your communities that no doubt help, and I'm not going to assume how much. Having been stationed in California, I've been through all three of your your reservation. Bishop's one of the prettiest places in California, in my opinion, and drive by Jamul all the time, living in San Diego. I've never been to Morongo, but they have the ability to have a population center closer by to help with that health than does the Alabama Coshada, and which is still trying to get on a step equal to others. So I appreciate all you're doing to come here, Mr. Chairman. Under your leadership, this hearing has grown from, I think, 60-something last year to 98 this year, and that means that we're making progress. And as has been addressed earlier, it's never fast enough because these treaties have been around for 150 years. And to your point, the opinion of taking 11 years, what in the hell takes 11 years to get an opinion on? Is it really that hard? The cuts to the hiring freezes of law enforcement when you've got candidates is a problem. The law enforcement issue alone, and at another time when we have more time, I would like to find out from various tribes whether or not, because I don't know, I don't have any tribes in my district, whether or not there's a cultural barrier to a desire from members of the community to serve in law enforcement or not. And I'm sure it's not a one-size-fits-all, but if that's a problem, and it's a rhetorical question, doesn't need an answer today. But if there's a problem, how do we overcome that and help so that the law enforcement does come in a way that eliminates this MMIP problem, and allows health to overall improve because the people know they're protected. That's a basic right of everybody to know they live in a safe community. So thanks again for having us the first half of the first day, and more days to come. So thank you all for being here.
I will say before you go, I was going to say this earlier, one of the things that there's a lot of people that aren't familiar with Indian issues and so forth, like this committee is and stuff, that you talk to them and they'll say, well, they got casinos, they can take care of it, you know, and all that kind of stuff. They don't realize that, A, not every tribe has casinos, and B, not all casinos are the same. If you go to the Chickasaw Nation, their casino is very profitable and stuff because they're on the highway to Dallas, you know?
They are Tom Cole's.
Yeah, yeah. But if you go to the Prairie Winds Casino out on what is it, Lone Pine or Rosebud, one of the reservations, you got to drive to get to that, so they're not going to have the same effect and stuff. So that's not the answer. I think that you're right, but it's not the answer to solving these problems, and it doesn't relieve us of our responsibility under the law. So I thank you all for being here today and your testimony. It always sparks interest in our brain and thought, aha, that's what's going on. So I appreciate it.
Chairman Simpson, I appreciate you saying that, you know, and I would just like to, you know, add on to that is that that's why we advocate for, you know, those tribes that can't be here.
Yep.
That still need these resources. They can't, you know, as you know, they freeze these funds. They're really hitting these tribes hard. So that's why we're here.
Thank you. And this will, we will adjourn the morning session of this one, and we'll be back at 1:30? Is that right? Oh, we got a vote series.